Cool Figure TV. Revolutionary salute. Revolutionary salute. Like, share, subscribe. Welcome to the House of Revolution. You know I'm your humble host, the Yao Ming of Revolution. Obama has retaliated. On Biden. But first, be sure to wipe your feet. That means hit the like button. You in the House of Revolution. Like, share, subscribe. The hardest working revolutionary in the business is back with more information for y'all. So let's get right to it. Hunter Biden being squeezed for Joe Biden's arrogance to dare defy Obama and put Kamala in power. So they squeezing him. If you get Hunter, you get Joe.
Allegations against Hunter Biden. The special counsel in a tax case against the president's son is now accusing him of taking money from a foreign businessman to influence U.S. policy while his father was vice president. Our senior investigative correspondent, Aaron Kursk, is here with the details on that. Good morning, Aaron.
Good morning to you, Lindsay. There are no new charges here, but this is the closest the special counsel has come to tying President Biden to his son's foreign business affairs. Special counsel David.
This is the closest they've come to tying Biden to Hunter Biden's business affairs. What business affairs? Illegal selling of influence to crooked governments. The whole time they've been telling people Hunter Biden, Joe Biden was the business. What business were they in? Selling influence. That's illegal.
David Weiss accused Hunter Biden of accepting about $1 million from a Romanian businessman who was attempting to influence U.S. policy and public opinion while Joe Biden was vice president. In a new court filing, the special counsel said Hunter Biden and two associates were hired in 2015 by Gabriel Papaviciu, a Romanian real estate tycoon who was facing corruption charges in his home country and wanted the U.S. to intervene. The filing said Hunter Biden was concerned lobbying work might cause political ramifications for his father, so the payment was structured in a way that concealed the true nature of the work he was performing. This is all part of a tax case scheduled to go to trial in California next month. Yeah, Hunter Biden has pleaded not guilty to charges.
Tax evasion, money laundering. But what were they paying you for? Why would these governments, Republicans been saying this, but why are they bringing this up now? Because it's retaliation on Joe Biden for vouching for Kamala Harris. They didn't want her, especially Obama. I told y'all this was going to happen, so just letting Joe know. Oh, you want to try to play dumb with us? Okay.
Stemming from $1.4 million in taxes that went unpaid while he was struggling with addiction. He faces no charges of improper foreign lobbying, but what prosecutors said this evidence shows Biden's mind was clear when he skirted.
He's supposed to be facing the charges for being for not registering as a foreign agent. He did not register. He absolutely tried to help a foreign country. They paid him to get influence with the U.S. government, his father. You know, salute family. But they squeezing Hunter. Hunter going to federal prison. But like they say, Hunter, this leads to Joe. Hunter could do nothing for these people. It's Joe that's corrupt, crooked, and got his son ass in serious trouble.
Trouble is far from over, apparently, for Hunter Biden. Back in the news where the DOJ now argues a criminal oligarch paid off the first son to try and influence U.S. policy while President Biden was serving as VP. Some new documents out there, and Chad Pergram's seen them. He is live on Capitol Hill to take us through this story. What now in the chapter of Hunter Biden? Chad?
Bill, good morning. It's possible this could be the closest anyone has come to showing a transfer of money from overseas in exchange for potential influence over U.S. policy with Hunter Biden. Now, we've heard about Hunter Biden's ties to the Ukrainian energy firm Burisma. House investigators have probed that for months. But how about potential links to Romania? Now, prosecutors in Hunter Biden's tax case say he worked for Gabriel Papaviciu. He is a Romanian business magnate. Now, the allegation is that Hunter Biden and his business colleagues took $3 million.
Now, this is what they raided Scott Ritter home for. Something similar, not registering as a foreign agent for a government. Now, it's absolutely legal for a foreign government to pay you to lobby the U.S. government on their behalf, but you have to go register. Let the U.S. government know what you're doing, what you're making. Pay your taxes on that shit. It's absolutely legal. Any country can give you money to go speak on their behalf, but you have to register. That's what they're saying. Scott Ritter didn't do for Russia. Scott saying that's a lie. He wasn't a foreign agent. They never paid him to lobby for them. But it's what Hunter Biden was doing, and it's illegal to do that. But the Democrats said forever it was a lie. What does this have to do with Joe? And Republicans always said, why the hell would people from overseas pay Hunter Biden millions of dollars? It's because they wanted influence with his father, who was in the White House. You see? But the point is, why are they bringing this up now and saying, oh, look, it looked like we got something in Romania? The Republicans been telling y'all this. I've been talking about this. Well, why now? Because Joe Biden defied the Democratic Party because he was bitter that they forced him out. And I warned y'all they was going to do this to Joe. Let him know, nigga, we still got you. You better stop this nonsense right now. No more games until this over with. Or Hunter ass going to jail. And if Hunter goes, Joe Biden ass going to be on an ankle monitor because anything Hunter get found guilty of, Joe will be found guilty of too. But they can't indict a sitting president. When his ass leave office, they will do him like Trump.
In payments. Popoviciu faces a criminal investigation in Romania over a land deal. Special counsel David Weiss makes that very case in his filing in California. Weiss alleges they structured the deal for Hunter so it, quote, concealed the true nature of the work he was performing. Now, prosecutors say there were concerns about ramifications for President Biden. Popoviciu is expected to testify at Hunter Biden's tax evasion trial in Los Angeles that starts September 5th. He's charged with failing to pay $1.4 million in taxes over a 4-year period. The House's impeachment inquiry remains open. Republicans claim Hunter Biden sold his father as the brand and used the president for access. Bill?
Okay, Chad, more to come apparently. Chad Pergram on the Hill, thank you for that, sir.
I'm Steve Ducey. I'm Brad.
Biden went along with it. Biden got on the phone. Biden took pictures. Biden met all these people. It's not just about Hunter, but Obama is definitely behind this, man. Obama told these people to teach Joe a lesson. They didn't want Kamala. Biden stabbed him in the back because they forced him out. So what are they doing? They stabbing Biden. Hunter, you going to federal prison.
The latest accusation against President Joe Biden's son Hunter comes as the federal case looking into his foreign business dealings draws near. It centers on Romanian businessman Gabriel Popoviciu, with allegations Hunter Biden and another business associate received compensation from him, asserting he was attempting to influence U.S. policy and public opinion and cause the United States to investigate the investigation of him.
Now, now, the man paid Hunter Biden. That means Joe Biden absolutely did what the man asked him to do. Joe Biden absolutely did what the Ukrainian oligarchs asked him to do, and that was fire the prosecutor who was investigating Hunter Biden. These Democrats, they try to, it's all gonna come back and hunt them, and we don't want to hear what does this have to do with Kamala? Oh, please, all of them is corrupt, all of them crooked, all of them they've been in on this scam, not just gold brick Bald Menendez.
In Romania, all while Hunter Biden's father was serving as vice president. A relationship already uncovered by the House Oversight Committee last year.
Hunter Biden and his associates capitalized on a lucrative financial relationship with the Romanian national who was under investigation for and later convicted of corruption in Romania.
Popoviciu's sentence in Romania has now been dropped. That unnamed American business associate expected to testify against Hunter Biden in his upcoming trial, in which he's pleaded not guilty. Experts say the new evidence could show a violation of the Foreign Agents Registration Act.
It's absolutely going to show he violated the Foreign Registration Act. What all the Republicans been talking about and the Democrats been trying to avoid. But that's not the tip of the iceberg. The tip of the iceberg is he worked for Joe. He was only the bag man. He worked for Joe. He just delivered the money and he delivered the underhanded contracts and he put the shell companies in. Joe Biden ass committed treason. He was doing dirty business as the vice president of the United States. Did more dirty business when he left the White House. And now he wants us to believe all of a sudden him and his son stopped doing this dirty business. Hell no, they still in dirty business.
FARA, that Hunter Biden may have been trying to influence government policy on behalf of Popoviciu.
It seems
he did do that, but he didn't only do it with Romania. He did it with Ukraine. He did it with China. The Republicans told y'all, Joe Biden's granddaughters were getting checks from these corrupt people from overseas. And Republicans said, what could Joe Biden's granddaughter have done to get a check in the mail in her name? They was trying to spread the dirty money out.
Very clear that Hunter Biden was part of a team that was trying to steer the Department of Justice into changing that designation on his behalf.
The trial also includes charges related to Hunter Biden's work with the Chinese energy company CEFC and the Ukrainian gas company Burisma.
In each of these cases, Hunter Biden was paid millions of dollars from these entities, and they were looking to varying degrees for favorable actions from the United States government, namely from his father.
Hunter was a junkie on crack and all this. What the hell was Hunter doing with all these billions of dollar transactions? Working for his daddy. And Joe wrong. Joe didn't give a damn about Hunter. Joe a disgusting father. All Joe wanted was to be rich, and he was using his position in the Senate and the U.S. government to get rich, filthy rich, shaking down other countries. And he didn't give a damn his son was throwing his life away. Now, there's nothing he can do except he can write a pardon for Hunter right now. That's how he can save Hunter. But other than a pardon, Hunter going to federal prison. But that's not the point. Because if Hunter go to prison, they got to charge Joe. Because Joe was the one that was given the favors as the money came in. They would have never gave Hunter millions of dollars for no reason at all.
Father, the Vice President of the United States.
The trial is set to take place less than a month from now on September 5th in Los Angeles. Now, this is separate from that other high-profile case in which Hunter Biden was found guilty on federal gun charges in June. In Washington.
Come on.
I'm Christine.
He still got the federal weapons charge, man. Come on, man. And y'all think that they twisting Joe arm right now. Don't try nothing else. Don't you dare. You already established in the back and vouch for Kamala Harris. So I just wanted to start with that piece of information. It's a Game of Thrones still going on. Hotel Revolutionary Salute, family. I thought Obama was going to take that Kamala Harris vice president nomination laying down. He absolutely did not. He just flexed on Joe Biden and got his son hooked up to the federal. That's federal. He going. You can't beat that. You can't beat that. But now it's what they're going to threaten Joe with, because they definitely got to either say he's too elderly like they did before to face conviction, or they got to charge him with whatever Hunter get charged with.
/redacted.
Well, in a few weeks, Chicago will become the center of the universe with the Democratic National Convention. And I don't say this lightly. War is coming to the Midwest. Venezuelan illegal immigrants have taken over Chicago ahead of the DNC. And our next guest has uncovered incredible information showing how Venezuelan gangs are affecting the entire Chicagoland area. The mainstream media, of course, is largely ignoring this story, not covering it at all. And he has also uncovered new evidence from the Chicago PD directly, showing two different Venezuelan shelters that are running human sex trafficking operations right out of those shelters. Terry Newsom is our guest. He's the host of Behind the Enemy Lines podcast, and perhaps no one knows more about what's going on the ground in Chicago than Terry. Terry, welcome to the show. Great to have you here on Redacted.
No, thank you for having me, Clayton. I appreciate it.
Well, and I appreciate all the work that you've been doing. And of course, you've been working very closely with our good friend, J.J. Carroll.
I'm watching and understanding this Venezuelan trick they're doing. These disgusting criminals, they disgusting. You know, we don't like criminals at all. But you see, they made sure Maduro did what Fidel did, emptied his prisons and kicked them out the country. All disgusting criminals, sent them towards our border. The U.S., they want those criminals here. You want to know why? Because so much crime gonna go on. They be talking about the Venezuelan sex trafficking rings and Venezuelan kidnapping rings. And the Venezuelan been breaking into houses. And I just heard a report that the Venezuelan had put a hit on police officers, Venezuelan gang. They've been shooting at police officers too. So the people in America gonna hear this. They gonna get to hating Venezuela. They gonna hear that. They gonna hate the name Venezuela. So what is going on right now? They want war with Venezuela. The U.S. is disgusting for what they're doing. They want the Venezuelan criminals to terrorize us. So when they say, you know what, why don't we just go to war with them? People will agree to war.
Picture of what's happening in the Midwest. You know, a lot of people think of what's happening at the southern border. They look at those images of the southern border and they think that's where it's happening. But Chicago has really become ground zero for the illegal immigration disaster in the United States. Can you kind of paint a picture of how bleak it is?
Yeah, sure. You made a great point there about Chicago being ground zero. So say if Trump wins and he stops everything at the border, well, we're just getting started in Chicago, Clayton. You know, I mean, it's just the damage is done. They're already here. They're being spread from Chicago beyond throughout the Chicagoland area and the state of Illinois, for that matter. And you know, I first became aware of it in December. You know, I live in the western suburbs. There's train tracks that go from all these different western suburbs into the city of Chicago. So after Brandon Johnson came up with this idea to say he was going to impound the buses if they got dropped off in the inner city, they just started dropping them off at the suburbs. And mine was being one of the first ones. And they would drop bus loads off. So I would get calls from the community folks, and I go there and I start, you know, confronting them, or I don't say confronting them, but you know, I'd film it and so forth. So the first bus, it was probably 75% men with a mix of families. The second bus was like 95% men, military age men. One of the first things one individual did as soon as he stepped foot off the Mexican border into my community is flash the Tren de Largo gang sign at me. Proudly flashed it at me. And at that time, I knew it was a gang sign, right? You know, you don't have to be, you know, a law enforcement. I knew it was a gang sign. I just didn't know what type of gang sign it was at that time because it was in December. It wasn't until January, if you remember, the New York Police Department, a cop was beat up by 6 of them, and the guy gave the finger. And then all of a sudden, the reporters in New York said this is the violent prison gang. I'm like, oh my God, this guy's got the tattoo, everything. So I'm like, that guy is Tren de Largo, and he was bragging about his gang coming into Chicago. I mean, within 20 feet, he got off the bus, you know? So, I started following there, and then, so what they would do is they would drop them off at all these nice suburbs, you know, they drop them off and they kind of rotate, you know, where they drop them off at the northwestern suburbs, western suburbs. And then there's it's called Union Station and Ogilvie Station. So then I started going there on New Year's Day. I went there. And there was a Metro police officer, and I'm sitting there because they get off there and just kind of curious of what happens from when they get dropped off in the inner city, right? And I go up to this Metro cop and I said, "Is this where the illegals?" He's a Spanish cop with tattoos on his side. You know what I mean? He was like, he looked like a gang member. This police officer, a Metro police officer. I said, "Is this where the illegals get dropped off from the train station?" He looks at me and goes, "Well, what do you mean?" I go, "I live in the western suburbs. They're dropping them off there, and I'm told they're coming in here." He goes, I guess sometimes. And I said, "Do they have a host? Do they have a handler that picks them up?" He goes, "What do you mean?" Like with an attitude. I said, "Well, somebody greeting them?" He goes, "I guess sometimes." And I went and sat down. And I swear, not less than a minute later, because I was going to sit there for a little while and go home, right? The reason that cop was there that I was talking to, the door's open. And here comes Venezuelans with their little blankets from the Red Cross. He was there greeting them in Spanish. And I'm like, look at him. The guy lied to me, right? Why are you lying to me, right? And so what happens is that they take them from there. They come in by plane as well. We could talk about that. But they take them from there, and then I followed them. And I had Venezuelan guys, you know, with their face covered and stuff in the train station, flashing V and stuff at me. Again, not necessarily the gang signs, but if Venezuelan's so good, then why are you flashing V's in my face, you know, as I'm walking there? And then the sergeant tried to intimidate me from not filming them. He's like, he goes, "You have to leave." I'm like, "No, I don't. It's a train station." "Yeah, yes, you do." He's another Hispanic police officer. And I said, "This is a public space." He goes, "I'm going to call Amtrak." I go, "Go ahead, call Amtrak." And obviously nothing happened. So then I stood there and I followed him and these 2 other Spanish people from the Office of Emergency Management, which is basically Chicago's FEMA, right? It's Chicago's FEMA.
Right.
These 2 people came in, they talked to the police officers, and then they escorted them out to the south side of Union Station, and there's a school bus sitting there. And then they start putting them into the school bus, and I'm standing on the sidewalk. I'm not in anyone's way, and this woman's, you know, yelling at me. I got this all on film, saying that I can't film. I said, "Yes, I can." "No, you don't." I go, "Yes, I can. I'm on the sidewalk. You don't have permission to film. The city has a contract with the bus company, and there's no." I go, it doesn't matter what contract. I'm standing in the street." Then she went and got the same 2 cops to come, and they confronted me, right? And he goes, "Well, how would you like it if, you know, your children were being filmed?" "I would be upset." I go, "I wouldn't smuggle my children into a country illegally," right? You know, so
Right.
that's the MO of multiple different locations, and I'm sure JJ talked about it. They try to intimidate, harass, and scare us from filming the truth. It doesn't matter if it's at the intake center, the Standard Club, the Inn of Chicago. And by the way, we just found out the Standard Club, which is on the Mag Mile of Chicago, it's where like the shopping district where everyone comes to. The Standard Club is a historic 150-year-old building that was initially built by the Jewish community and changed hands, but both of them were coincidentally bought in 2022 in the midst of this crisis by the same person. So now we're looking into, now they're full, right? Capacity. These dumpy hotels are in these nice areas of Chicago, one right next to the Department of Justice building, one in the Magnificent Mile, are full of illegals, and they have NGOs in there managing them.
So these NGOs, the Catholic Charities, and others that have been facilitating this invasion into Chicago, and we are about to see the DNC here in a few weeks. And multiple sources have been saying this is going to be a disaster. What you're seeing unfolding in the next few weeks. Can you paint a picture, help our audience understand where the DNC will be located and why this is such a tinderbox moment right now?
Yeah, sure. One other thing, Ben Bergquam, you probably know him. He came into Chicago. I took him to the side. I grew up in the southwest side of Chicago, and there's a Holiday Inn there that it looks brand new. They remodeled it, right? So I found out from my friends that they're moving illegals there. So me and Ben went there, and sure enough, it's the same security guards, the NGO guys. They wouldn't let us in. They got signs in Spanish and Arabic at this place now, Spanish and Arabic. So, I guess that's kind of telegraphing what's going to go on there. So this was built to move these Venezuelans away from the United Center. The United Center, the Blackhawks and the Bulls and stuff. You're probably familiar with that. And then during the daytime, it's going to be at the McCormick Place, which is right off of Lake Michigan. So they're going to have activities there. And then in the evening, they're going to have it at the United Center. So they're trying to clear out some of the mess as best they can. But one thing that's kind of interesting is, and JJ and Ryan were at the intake center, with me. I took them over there. And just south of the intake center, it's called Tent City. There's like 35 orange tents. You might have saw them. Been there for a long, long time. Homeless people, ex-military people are upset that, like when these Venezuelans come, not even a block north, like a football field north of there is the intake center. So wherever they come in by plane or bus or train, they go there. They got 6 tents. They're not tents. They're like white structures, very nice. And they have anywhere from 2 to 10 buses. In the wintertime, they're warming buses. In the summertime, they're cooling buses. These people that I interviewed in February were telling me how they went in January during the deep freeze, tried to get on those warming buses, and they wouldn't let them because they weren't Venezuelans. One guy said, I had 5
Americans who are homeless in Chicago, veterans who are trying to get on these warming buses, are being told you can't get on these buses because we've got illegal Venezuelans sitting here.
Yes. And then, like when JJ and, same stuff, they try to, the same NGO guys, the one guy's from Helping Hands, I did a facial recognition and we found it and I scanned it and got his LinkedIn. He's from this company, he's like 30 people and they're like the PMO, the quarterbacks of this center, the intake center, right? And same guy every time, he's from Texas too. So we got these outsider NGOs making a fortune to help destroy part of our, our Chicagoland and our state. And they're making money off it, and they try to intimidate and harass us to tell us we can't stand on Polk Street. Tell us we're not allowed. And then I had a guy from the CTA in a little minivan while we're filming the buses, and JJ was there, and the guy's telling me I can't film the buses that are on the street unless I get permission from the CTA, just like the other lady said to me. I mean, they're nuts. And what are they trying to hide if they think they're doing something good? So for the DNC convention that's coming up, Pritzker cleared out all these homeless people, tore down their tents, cleaned it up, put an 8-foot fence surrounding the whole area. So granted, you don't want people living like that, and they didn't care before, but all of a sudden they tore all this down, cleaned it up, put this fence in. Then I went back to the intake center just to check it out. And sure enough, they got brand new sidewalks, that weren't there when JJ was there. New sidewalks. And this is kind of like a cruddy area. It's like not necessary. The only biggest thing there is now the intake center, which was an empty lot until they allocated it for this intake center. And they got special curbs for these buses and little plastic none of that was there. So I'm just speculating that I bet you Pritzker is going to take some of these radical leftists. That's why he cleaned, because it's 2.5 miles away from the United Center. So it's not that close, right? I'm assuming he's going to do little tours. Why else would he fix the sidewalk up? And, it wasn't necessary. So they're making it look better than it is. And so that's being done for the United Center. Now, you'll see in the Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
You'll see in the news, they're talking about, I have friends on the police department, right? They say it's going to be a cluster, senior people, some guys ready to retire, right? They say it's going to be a mess, right? It's a mess. And things are changing. As a matter of fact, I talked to this guy last year. He goes, they're changing like daily, and especially the stuff with Harris and all this other, crazy stuff that's affecting it. We're going to have the inner perimeter, and other agencies are going to handle the exterior perimeter. I imagine the Secret Service and whoever else, right? And these guys, if you see the local media in Chicago, and they're talking of preparation for the DNC, a lot of it's that fluffy bullshit on how they're being taught, the police officers, to handle these protests and how to handle them in the right way, right? They're not, you don't hear about protecting the police officers and stuff, right? They're more concerned of, handling it the right way. And which is kind of funny, the anarchists, the Antifa, the Hamas, they're putting it out there. We're going to make this greater than 1968. They're going to make it, they're promoting it. They're promoting about violence. They're promoting about going on the CTA, going door to door. They're openly promoting this stuff out there. So now
it reminds me of the UK right now, where you're having, the two-tiered justice system right now. You're having the police being told basically stand down, allow these machete-wielding gangs to run rampant. But if you criticize them and call them rapists, that's where the police will come to your house and make arrests if you criticize them. And so it sounds like Chicago is being sort of organized in the same way. The Chicago PD being told handle these protesters, these Antifa and others, as with kid gloves.
Yeah, and that concerns me for my police officer friends, right? And then they got to worry about their job, right? So, they asked. Yeah, I live in DuPage County, which is the second largest county in Illinois. So they reached out to, because they're supposed to try to collaborate and help each other, right? On important, events. They asked for 300 officers, and the sheriff said no. What, would you want to send your police officers into Chicago where they support the criminals over the police, right? I mean, he said, no, we're not going to do it. I mean, I wouldn't want to go out there when you have these constraints and you got to be worried. You got to protect yourself and then also try to protect your job at the same time. I mean, their hands are going to be constrained. And if you think about 1968, who was the mayor of Chicago then? Daley. Remember he said about looting, shoot to kill? I don't know if you remember that, because I grew up here. When there was looting and stuff that happened, all the burned out up and down Madison Street. Matter of fact, by the way, it would be ironic, United Center is right there where the riots were and where all these burned. When I was a kid, we would drive and look. It looked like a war zone, Clayton. So 1968, I graduated 79. We would drive down and it looked like, as I look back now and I read the buildings were just, they left it like that forever. I'm not saying it's going to happen like that, but what I am saying is that people knew how Mayor Daley was, right? Well, now they know how Mayor Brandon Johnson is. So to me, I think they think they're going to get away with way, way, way more. The difference is that these Antifa guys, the anarchists, the Hamas, they're all coming together. They're well funded, as you know, right? These guys are well funded. And the Chicago Antifa, I got a story coming on. And the Chicago Antifa guys are coordinating. They're the quarterbacks of coordinating these different organizations together. And then lay on top of that, you've got all these African-American folks that are voting for Trump. And you probably saw some of the stuff that, what JJ had you interview with, or saw some of his interviews with these leaders and stuff. So there's going to be a big contingent of African-Americans that are supposed to show up to protest the Democrats for ruining the city of Chicago. And I'm worried.
Well, that's what I'm worried about. That's what I'm worried about, that's where this war will come from, right? You have the African-American population in Chicago that's absolutely fed up with liberal policies, which have destroyed their jobs, their community, have invited all of these illegal Venezuelans into that area. They're going to go down there to protest. I think you've said it and others, they're just one gunshot away from war breaking out.
Yeah. Right before I got on your show, my friends send me stuff, right, from all over Chicago. I got a message or a story, a knife fight. My friend said it. It was like gangs of New York, 20 Venezuelan, I'm assuming they're Venezuelan immigrants, and a knife fight right there off the Mag Mile. So they're probably associated with the Inn of Chicago. And they're running like knives trying to stab each other and round cars. So this stuff is just beginning. I mean, they just got here. They're getting settled in. They're getting organized. So I live in the western suburbs. There's a mall called Oak Brook Mall, high end. It's like how you say my mall. It's close to my house. And that's where we go. That's where my children go. My wife goes, and my mom. And so they had up through June, there was 150 Venezuelans arrested there. And some of them 5, 6 times, right? So DuPage County doesn't put up with that crap, but they're constrained with this goofy laws that Pritzker put in place, right? And so some of them, so they're organized, they're coordinated. Like, so for instance, they're taking things and they're working with somebody to sell this stuff, like big KitchenAid mixers that women, fancy stuff that a Venezuelan doesn't certainly need. And they're catching them. There's another suburb right off the railroad tracks. 12 of them came in. They're younger. 2 of the 12 were arrested. The 10 of the 12, they sent them back. They were stealing bikes from the pool and other neighborhoods, and they caught all these idiots. And then it's a very woke, liberal, high-end, very high-end income. And the community members, the woke ones that were okay with all this liberal stuff, are now complaining that the police didn't arrest them. Well, their hands are constrained. Matter of fact, one of the cops is my buddy. He's like, we don't even know of these minors, if they are minors, and if we have real names. They put them on the train and send them back to their shelters. So this is going to expand. Another woman, Carol Stream, her 42-year-old husband, and they have a 4-year-old kid. This Venezuelan stabbed her in front of the 4-year-old kid so many times she was almost decapitated. And I could go on and on. I so 6 blocks from my house, the gas station, the Speedway that we use, the sheriff warned people that Venezuelans are going in there. And you say if you go inside, I never go inside, we use a credit card out there. But those who go inside, there'll be a Venezuelan woman that'll approach them and ask in broken English, can you lend me $5? I ran out of gas. And they go through your car. So they start catching them and they're going in packs and doing this in the gas stations.
This is Biden's America. It's the Biden-Harris America, and the DNC at the center of it all in Chicago right now. Terry, I want to check back with you here as we get closer to the DNC and during
Officials are on high alert as a notoriously violent prison gang is spreading from coast to coast. Tren de Aragua, or TDA, was born out of Venezuela in a prison and has been linked to crime like this jewelry store heist in Colorado. News Nation obtaining a memo warning law enforcement that an estimated 1,000 TDA members have been given the green light to attack officers. News Nation's
Come on, man. This is ridiculous. By Harris and Walz, the Harris-Walz ticket. Harris VP, he love this. He wants the borders wide open, ruining our communities, our neighborhoods. They got now, if these people didn't get the green light to shoot at police officers, what the hell you think they're going to be doing to our people? They going to let you make it? Fuck no, you getting robbed too. You getting pillaged, plundered too. Your loved ones could be sexually assaulted too, because they're doing a lot of that. This is bullshit, man. How the hell did Trump see the future? Say they're coming over the border, they're raping, they're murdering. Remember they said, no, that's racist. What the hell do you think they're doing?
Alicia Nieves joins us now live from New York, where these gang members have actually shot at police. Alicia, how widespread is this gang?
Yeah, Anna, good morning. This is a violent Venezuelan gang. It's infiltrated U.S. cities across the country from coast to coast, becoming more brazen and organized, according to authorities. In just the last 2 months, we have had at least 3 major incidents on the West Coast and here back on the East Coast. Just this past week, as a matter of fact, authorities have linked a member of Tren de Aragua's gang members to a violent June jewelry heist in Denver. In nearby Aurora, Colorado, the gang is accused of taking control of a local apartment complex, using it as headquarters of their operation. And the footage you're seeing in a second here actually shows lawyers, or what lawyers representing several apartment complexes say is the gang
remember they
seizing
tried to
control.
bust a bunch of them into the black communities. Black people rose up. That's why a lot of black people, Chicago, New York, and said, oh, hell no, we want to talk to Trump because of this. This what broke their back. Like, hell no. So they was already doing a lot of this in the black community.
And of these apartment complexes, leading to gang violence and numerous code violations. Now, throughout the country, police departments, as you noted a moment ago, warned that the gang leaders have given members in the U.S. the green light to shoot officers. And unfortunately, that memo coming after an incident happened already here in New York City in June. As you said a moment ago, 2 NYPD officers were shot by a man living out of a migrant shelter. That man, Bernardo Raul Castro Mata, after his arrest, actually identified himself as a member of Tren de Aragua and allegedly told police that he crossed the U.S. border, came to New York, and when he got to the shelter in the city, the 19-year-old was recruited by the gang to commit robberies and even given a gun. Now, Castro Mata also
you
told
see what they're doing? You see what they're doing? It's just like they do the same thing in prison. They are forcing if the youngsters ain't in no prison gang, when they get over here, they're gonna be forced to get one, or they're gonna be preyed upon by their own community. With that, we gotta protect each other. We gotta look out for each other. All of those same hustle BS. Now they forced this man to get in the gang. He didn't come, shot 2 cops.
Investigators that gang leaders actually have been instructing a lot of their members here in the U.S., especially here in New York City, to bring guns into shelters, and they're able to do so relatively easily by utilizing food delivery services because food is not scanned through the security system.
It's ridiculous, and the Democratic policy is only going to make it worse. Imperialistic policies only make it worse. Keep on fucking with Venezuela, and the people keep living in the country. They're gonna come over here. They're gonna be mad. They smiling. They smiling when they get over here. They biting. They turning on people. They hate that they got to be over here. They don't want to be over here. So it's like all you can steal, kill, like pirates of the Caribbean. You know what I'm saying? Well, they locked up Venezuela. They locked up America. They don't give a damn. This is what the Democrats did to our goddamn communities. And like once again, if they got the green light to shoot at police, what the hell do you think they're gonna do to the citizens of this country?
At these shelters. So this is obviously a growing concern, not only here in New York City, but again, across the country from the West Coast to the East Coast. We do know federal agencies are on this and trying to work with local officials to curb this growing gang activity.
Yeah. Well, it sounds like if that's the weak spot, they need to start scanning the food trucks then as they're coming through. Alicia, thank you so much.
No joke. She laughing. They don't goddamn joke, lady. Shit, you drop them off in front of your goddamn house. Shit, this is not no joke. See, this is another reason why everybody talking about blue no matter who. Look, oh, what? Oh, really? You can't, they ain't gonna protect us. They don't even want you to carry no firearm. Imagine that. Imagine all of that crime roaming around, and the Democrats don't even want you to arm yourself. They don't want you to get shooting training. They don't want you to go to the gun range. They don't want none of that type of bullshit. The Democrats. But they want all of the migrants over here, and it's bringing a bunch of criminalistic activity.
In Chicago, we know that the Biden-Harris created migrant crisis has really affected our brothers and sisters in Chicago. And as you can see on the screen, Chicago's response to migrant influx stirs longstanding frustrations among Black residents, and rightfully so, ladies and gentlemen. Now, they had the closure of Wadsworth Elementary School in 2013, and it was a blow to residents of a majority Black neighborhood it serves, symbolizing a city indifferent to their interests. So when the city reopened Wadsworth last year to shelter hundreds of migrants without seeking the community input, it added insult to injury. Across Chicago, Black residents are frustrated. Their longstanding needs are not being met, while the city's newly arrived are cared for with a sense of urgency and with their tax dollars. Remember, ladies and gentlemen, this is the Democrat Party who runs the city of Chicago. The migrant crisis, the Biden-Harris migrant crisis, they created that crisis. That crisis wasn't like that before they got into office. On day one of the Biden-Harris administration, they immediately got rid of Remain in Mexico. They shut down the Keystone Pipeline. 2 weeks later, gas prices shot through the roof. They reinstituted catch and release, which means they crossed the border. They just kind of filled out the information and let them go into the interior of the United States of America. And a lot of people have came to Chicago, and they have been taking millions and millions and millions of dollars in resources, getting free rent, getting job fairs that Black Americans in Chicago cannot get at all. But yet they tell you as Black Americans, vote blue no matter who, but you've been voting blue in Chicago, but look what's happening to you right now with your tax dollars. Now, and I quote, Genesis Young says, our voices are not valued nor heard. Now, that's a lifelong Chicagoan who lived near Wadsworth. Chicago is one of the several big American cities grappling with a surge of migrants. They say that Greg Abbott in Texas has been sending them by the busload to highlight his grievances with the Biden administration's immigration policy. Let's talk about that. Chicago labels itself as a sanctuary city. New York City labels itself as a sanctuary city. They're saying that you could bring everybody there and they can be there. We don't have sanctuary state status or anything like that here in Texas. Greg Abbott told Joe Biden, hey, man, get in control of this border here in Texas. What are you doing? No, he's incentivized them to come over. The Biden-Harris, Vice President Kamala Harris, that's the woman that wants ICE abolished. She don't want ICE anymore. Why? Well, let's talk about that. Her family came over here like that through immigration. So she want to make sure more of her family members from India could come over here. So that's why she's against immigration and for open borders. But it doesn't matter how it affects black people, black American people. You're just supposed to pay for everybody else to come in here. These same people will come in your city and talk crazy to you. Remember that video? Let's cue that video up.
More money for you. Bye-bye, bye-bye, bye-bye. Go back across the board. No more money for you. It's lazy, you lazy. You lazy. No more money for you.
That's the Biden and Harris administration for you and the migrant crisis they created in Chicago. While they're giving all your tax dollars to them, they're coming and telling you as black Americans that you're paying for them, no money for you. Now, let's continue. They say to manage the influx, Chicago has already spent more than $300 million of city, state, and federal funds to provide housing, healthcare, education, and more to over 38,000 mostly South American migrants who have arrived in the city since 2022, claiming they're desperate for help. They say the speed with which these funds were marshaled has stirred widespread resentment among black Chicagoans, and rightfully so. But community leaders are trying to ease racial tensions and channel the public frustrations into agitating, they say, for the greater good. And say the outcry over migrants in Chicago and other large Democrat-led cities is having wider implications in an election year. And saying the Biden administration is now advocating a more restrictive approach to immigration in his negotiations with Republicans in Congress. And he ended up doing an executive order to kind of slow it down a little bit. But see, it lets you know the whole time he could have slowed it down. He's only trying to slow it down just so Kamala can get elected. Let me tell you something, Chicago. You go out there, you go vote for that woman, Kamala Harris. You complaining now? I don't want to hear nothing after the election. If y'all in Chicago, knowing all your resources is going to migrants, that is the legacy of the Biden-Harris administration. Vice President Kamala Harris is just as responsible as President Joe Biden. She's running on his platform. Y'all would have to be silly to go out and vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. I mean, unless you want some more migrants to come in your backyard and you giving them all the resources. Remember, the migrants in Chicago is getting free rent, 6 months rent. How many of you as black Americans in Chicago got free rent? I haven't heard y'all getting it, right? But go vote for Vice President Kamala Harris. You will see. They say since the Wadsworth building reopened as the shelter, Young, they say, has felt extremely anxiety because of the noise, loitering, and around-the-clock police presence that came with it. They say more than anything, that she and other neighbors say it's a reminder of problems that have been left unsolved for years, including high rates of crime, unemployment, and homelessness. They say, and I quote, I definitely don't want to seem insensitive to them and them wanting a better life. However, if you can all of a sudden come up with these millions of dollars to address their housing, why didn't you address the homeless issue here? Said a Charlotte Jackson, the owner of a bakery and restaurant in the South Loop neighborhood. She's 100% correct because they don't care about black people in Chicago. That's why. They want to make sure that we stay at the bottom. These people just came across the border yesterday and they're getting a leg up.
Revolutionary salute to our brother Damon for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. I absolutely appreciate the love, family salute.
Over you, and you're paying the taxes. Your taxes that you're paying from your bakery is subsidizing the migrant crisis. That's the issue. But once again, black people in Chicago, vote blue no matter who, right? You vote blue, you're going to be voting broke because they're going to drain your pockets. And then you're going to be broke, homeless, and then the migrants going to have houses and everything, and then they're going to be looking down at you and talking about you lazy. Now, as we continue, they said that for so long, and so we accepted that this is how things had to be in communities, said a Chris Jackson, who co-founded the bakery with his wife. They say this migrant crisis has made many people go, wait a minute. No, it doesn't. And they're right. You don't have to deal with anything like this. Now, they say Chicago Mayor Brandon Johnson declined to comment, but they say that the city received more than $200 million from the state and federal government to help care for migrants after Johnson appealed to Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker and President Joe Biden. Now, I say the president, of course, we got the DNC coming up here in not too long. That's, something that probably going to be the plantation celebration, but we'll see. They say some Black Chicagoans are protesting the placement of shelters in their neighborhoods. They say, but others aim to turn the adversity into opportunity. It's not just Chicago. You also have people in New York City that have been complaining that all these military-age males they have been bringing to this country. It's been an explosion of crime in New York. It's been unalivings. It's been gang activity. They have not vetted none of these people. They just flooded them over. I told you before, if I had to be in charge, it would be women and small children only. Grown men and teenage males, stay in your homeland, fight, build that thing up. Now you can't come over here. Because a bunch of young men and grown men with nothing to do, it spells trouble. But the fact is, brothers and sisters in Chicago, you got to make a difference. You got to change that city that you're in. As long as you keep voting Democrat in Chicago, this is going to keep happening. And that's it. Remember, it's not a Rahm Emanuel problem. Y'all got rid of him. You got Lori Lightfoot. It's not a Lori Lightfoot problem. You got rid of her. Now you got Brandon Johnson. It's not even a Brandon Johnson problem. It's a Democrat problem because that's what they run on. They want to make sure, listen, they're not going dump all the migrants in these cities where a bunch of white people are at, are they? No. They dumping them right in the cities where Black Americans are at and taking your tax dollars to help them. But let you say, hey, I need a grant. I need a loan, home loan. I need a business loan. I need something. Oh, we ain't got it. But when it comes to them, oh, man, they writing checks. They passing out debit cards. Whatever you need, we got it. Black Americans are going to have to say something. Y'all all going to have to get registered to vote and change that all your aldermen, change your mayor. The elections coming up. Y'all, I'm telling y'all, if you want Black people to be done in this country, if you want Black Americans to be done in Chicago, go put Vice President Kamala Harris in there. Look at LA, Chicago. You put her in there, y'all gonna go the way of LA. Where Black people have been displaced, Black people are outnumbered, Black people are attacked by their gangs constantly. They're looking to harm Black people. Right now, y'all got the numbers. If you put Vice President Kamala Harris in there, LA is going to be your future. You will lose your community if you put Vice President Kamala Harris in there. I'm just warning you. You better think about the future and think about your children in Chicago. It is dangerous for anybody to be running around here talking about open borders at this point in the game. When we got inflation, when we got high gas prices, food prices, interest rates through the roof. We can't sit up here and import the whole world here. And on top of that, Kamala going to import her people on them H-1B visas from India. You better believe that. And she's going to paper them up when they get here. Y'all better think. Y'all better think. Now, a lot of brothers and sisters in Chicago have been waking up, but some of them still not woke up enough. I'm warning you. I'm warning you, Chicago. Brandon Johnson need to go. And y'all put Kamala in there. Y'all done in Chicago. I'm telling you, it won't take long. Y'all will be done.
Welcome to Jesse Waters Primetime tonight.
She won't even do interviews with friendly people. And the reason she doesn't is, number one, her policies are so bad. It's really ultimately not about her as much as about her policies.
Trump's talking while Harris is still hiding.
Remember that one big thing she did? Meaning confident that there will be a peaceful transfer of power in January 2025.
If Trump wins, no, I'm not confident at all. I mean, if Trump loses, I'm not confident at all.
Democrats promise election violence.
We need bodyguards for everybody in Civil War conditions.
Plus,
what is Kamala's plan for the future? I don't know, but that's her job, not mine.
Donald Trump held an hour-long press conference in Mar-a-Lago this afternoon, announcing he's agreed with 3 different networks to do 3 debates in September.
I think it's very important to have debates. And we've agreed with Fox on a date of September 4th. We've agreed with NBC, fairly full agreement, subject to them, on September 10th. And we've agreed with ABC on September 25th. The other side has to agree to the terms. They may or may not agree. I don't know if they're going to agree. She hasn't done an interview. She can't do an interview. She's barely competent, and she can't do an interview. But I look forward to the debates because I think we have to set the record straight.
The debate on Fox would be first, but everyone's still waiting to hear from Harris. Kamala hasn't done an interview since June. It's now August. And after being shamed for hiding from the media, they forced her down the stairs of Air Force Two. Watch.
President Trump had a press conference today. He talked about a lot of things. I wonder if you have a reaction to what he talked about.
Well, I'm glad that he's finally agreed to a debate on September 10th. I'm looking forward to it and hope he shows up.
Are you open to more debates?
I am happy to have that conversation about an additional debate for after September 10th, for sure.
You proposed 2 more debates.
Like I said, happy to have that conversation.
Kamala's seen Trump end people's political careers on the debate stage, and she's never participated in a presidential debate before. Trump's done 6. So she might be pretending to have the upper hand. I hope he shows up. Come on. She's terrified, and the ball's in her court. The networks and Trump have agreed to 3. She's agreed to 1. And if she finally comes to terms, the Fox debate would be first, right after Labor Day. That would give her 2 whole weeks after her convention to prepare. That's a lot longer than Biden had to prepare. And we saw what happened there. The Fox debate on September 4th would be before early voting starts. I know it's ridiculous to have 2 months of early voting, and the Republicans better have their act together. But shouldn't the country see these 2 square off before we cast a ballot? Kamala wants to wait as long as possible to debate Trump, because that debate could officially end the honeymoon.
What if this so-called honeymoon period doesn't end?
Oh, it's going to end. The honeymoon period's going to end. Look, she's got a little period. She's got a convention coming up. It's about policy. It's not about her. I think she's incompetent because I've watched her. She destroyed California. She destroyed San Francisco. Everything she's touched has turned to bad things. I'm not going to use foul language, but everything she's touched has turned bad. She's incompetent. She won't even do interviews with friendly people because she can't do better than Biden. She doesn't want to do interviews. And the reason she doesn't is, number one, her policies are so bad. Just to answer your question, I think that it's not going to change because it's really ultimately not about her as much as about her policies. She wants open borders, to defund the police. She wants to defund the police. She wants to take away your guns.
I liked hearing it's not about her, it's about her policy. I like that. The more personal it gets, the more she plays the victim and keeps the focus off substance. Kamala isn't Hillary. She's not tough. She doesn't know anything about anything, especially policy. And she's being protected like it's her first day of kindergarten. Instead of shredding her, Trump would just be better served petting her on the head. Oh, poor Kamala. This election isn't about hatred, at least not on the right. This election is about you.
Do you think Kamala Harris is worse than President Biden?
On
know
what?
you said you think you're very
No,
far
I think
ahead.
she's actually not as smart as he is.
Well, you said you think you're very far
I don't
ahead
think
in the
he's very
polls.
smart either, by the way. I'm not a big fan of his brain, but I think that she's actually not as smart as he is.
To what do you attribute her rising in the polls as becoming a more competitive race since she's taken over for Biden?
She's a woman. She represents certain groups of people, but I will say this. When people find out about her, I think she'll be much less. And I see it right now. I see her going way down in the polls now. Now that people are finding out that she destroyed San Francisco, she destroyed the state of California along with Governor Gavin Newsom. The polls have suggested, there are some polls that say we're going to win in a landslide. People are voting with their stomachs, meaning they're going to the grocery store. They're paying 50, 60, 70% more for food than they did just a couple of years ago.
Vote with your stomach. Kamala is not Joe Biden. And yes, Kamala is a woman. And there's excitement around that. You should see my mom. Suddenly she's a Kamala fanatic. Keeps talking about joy. Trump kept one dangerous woman out of the White House, and he can do it again. This country's thirsty for leadership after 4 years of Joe. And Hideaway Harris isn't going to fly. There's only so much bamboozling voters can tolerate, especially after the cover-up and now the bait and switch. And you can sense in the room today, the press, thrilled they could justify their paychecks. Kamala Harris hasn't held a press conference since 2023. And that wasn't even in America. It was in Dubai. So Trump got the gang back together. Room was packed. To use the left's logo, this is what democracy looks like. Freedom of the press, freedom of speech, live exchanges of ideas without censorship. Voters listening to a man vying to represent them and serve them, unscripted, without cheat sheets and teleprompters. The media misses Trump. The relationship between the press and the politicians is supposed to be tense and challenging. With Biden and Kamala, it's flaccid and corrupt. Everybody knows it. They were even up to their old tricks again.
There's been some discussion around Vice President Harris's relationship with Willie Brown, former mayor of San Francisco, and how that might have intersected with her career trajectory. So I'm just wondering if you followed that discussion at all.
Well, I know Willie Brown very well. In fact, I went down in a helicopter with him. We thought maybe this is the end. I haven't seen him in years.
I know Willie Brown.
But he told me terrible things about her. But this is what you're telling me anyway, I guess. But he had a big part in what happened with Kamala. But I don't know, maybe he's changed his tune, but he was not a fan of hers very much at that point.
Trump didn't take the Willie Brown bait. That's discipline. He was asked again about Kamala's racial heritage, didn't take the bait, disciplined. He was asked about abortion, disciplined. The press finally did get under his skin, of course, when they asked about crowd sizes.
Are you worried at all about the size of Harris's crowds?
Oh, give me a break. Listen, I had 107,000 people in New Jersey. You didn't report it. I'm so glad you asked. What did she have yesterday? 2,000 people? If I ever had 2,000 people, you'd say my campaign is finished. It's so dishonest, the press. When she gets 1,500 people, and I saw it yesterday on ABC, which they said, oh, the crowd was so big. I have 10 times, 20 times, 30 times the crowd size. And no, they never say the crowd was big. That's why I'm always saying, turn around the cameras. I'm so glad you asked that. I think it's so terrible when you say, well, she has 1,500 people, 1,000 people, and they talk about, oh, the enthusiasm. Let me tell you, we have the enthusiasm.
In the last week, Trump's done a rally, Fox and Friends, radio, podcasts. Today, he held an hour-long news conference, and the media accused him of laziness.
You have not had a public campaign event for nearly a week now. Tomorrow you'll be in Montana, which is not a swing state. Some of your allies have expressed concern that you're not taking this very seriously, particularly at a time where there's enthusiasm on the other side. Why haven't you been campaigning this week?
Because I'm leading by a lot and because I'm letting their convention go through. And I am campaigning a lot. I'm doing tremendous amounts of taping here. We have commercials that are at a level I don't think that anybody's ever done before. Plus, in certain cases, I see many of you in the room where I'm speaking to you on phones, I'm speaking to radio, I'm speaking to television. Television's coming over here. Excuse me, what are we doing right now? She's not doing any news conference. You know why she's not doing it? Because she can't do a news conference. She doesn't know how to do a news conference. She's not smart enough to do a news conference. And I'm sorry, we need smart people to lead this country because our country's never been in this danger before.
Why isn't anybody asking Kamala questions like that?
That's crazy.
Today was the first time she took questions from a reporter since Biden's debate. And the questions weren't, why are you so afraid of reporters? Where have you been hiding? Why did you cover up Joe's condition? Why'd you change all your positions? All they asked her is, what'd you think of Trump? The one question they did ask her about her running mate's stolen valor, she dodged.
Some of the criticism has been about your vice presidential pick and his leaving the National Guard at 24 years. Vance said that he deserted his own troops or his own colleagues. What's your take on that?
Listen, I praise anyone who has presented themselves to serve our country. And I think that we all should.
Okay, 6 seconds. On to the next question. Kamala answers questions like that, 1, 2 sentences, then goes to the next question. I'd love to see her do an hour, but the press doesn't, and neither do Democrat voters. Democrat voters aren't interested in what she believes, besides abortion and winning. That's it. Kamala World says they're deeply skeptical that any televised or print interviews offer much real upside for Harris. Because why run a real campaign when you can run a fake one and the media lets you get away with it? The media isn't demanding an interview now because they're in on the 90-day cover-up. Semaphore reports that Harris has been talking with her traveling press off the record. One reason that you haven't seen as much media grumbling about access, the outlets paying for the plane are getting FaceTime. So the media's in on the Kamala cover-up. I thought Kamala was a tough prosecutor that smashed through glass ceilings and calls Joe Biden racist to his face. Where'd that little girl go?
Sometimes people will open the door for you and leave it open. Sometimes they won't. And then you need to kick that door down. As a woman, there's a balance to be struck between being tough and being a bitch. If you got something to say,
if you want to be a girl boss, do you really want to be treated like a little girl? Because that's how we're treating Kamala. She's supposed to be the first female president. Do women want the first female president to be protected like a kid in a car seat, carried around, pampered, swaddled? Nobody's letting her out of her crib because they're afraid she might hurt herself. That's not how we treated Hillary. Hillary stood on her own 2 feet. Sure, Hillary got good press. She's a Democrat, of course, but she wasn't babied like Harris. If I were Harris, I'd be embarrassed. They're saying she didn't choose Shapiro because she didn't want him to upstage her. She chose Walz instead because he made her feel safe and warm and comfortable and promised not to run for president later. What is Walz? Kamala's cuddly stuffed animal? J.D. Vance strolled over to her tarmac, gave her traveling press corps jazz for helping her hide, and it worked. Smoked her out of her little hole today. And here's how the media covered it. Watch.
She's also got this stalker going around from city to city like a hangdog ex-husband trying to find her. So I trust the Secret Service, but I'm glad that she's got Tim Walz there too. He's on it.
Yeah, it is so weird, Lindsay. It is so weird that like Trump is playing golf somewhere while JD Vance is like stalking the vice president and saying weird stuff to reporters. Like he's not helping to make it himself not seem weird.
Is Walz her running mate or her security blanket? I mean, if anyone gets near Harris, they're a stalker. This is not high school, ladies. This is the great American Republic. She's not a woman at a bar. She's running to be the leader of the free world. But first you can't talk to Kamala, and now you can't go near her. She's not a princess. Trump's not running against Meghan Markle. They sent De Niro out to troll Trump at the courthouse. No one called him a stalker. We just called him crazy. And I love Bobby's movies. That's about it. Kamala's afraid of Fox, afraid of J.D. Vance at the airport, and now she's afraid of sitting down for an interview. She's probably afraid of spiders. The media is treating Kamala like she's vulnerable and needs protection, because she does. She's on a tight leash. They made her read the same speech twice in a row. Watch this.
It really is good to be back in Wisconsin. It is so good to be back in Michigan. Listen, let me tell you, I am clear. The path to the White House runs right through this state. And listen, I am clear. The path to the White House runs right through this state. I took on perpetrators of all kinds. I took on perpetrators of all kinds and had a summer job at McDonald's. I had a summer job at McDonald's. So hear me when I say, Detroit, when I say, I know Donald Trump's type. I know Donald Trump's type. And are we ready to fight for it? And are we ready to fight for it? And when we fight, we win.
Kamala's plagiarizing herself and Trump. I thought fight, fight, fight was his line. Former White House Press Secretary Kayleigh McEnany's here. Kayleigh.
Gentlemen, Donald Trump just had an hour-long press conference where he took questions uninterrupted, and we got a major bombshell regarding the potential debates. I talked about it yesterday. He came out, and it seemed like he was willing to do multiple debates. It wasn't just Fox News or nothing like he originally said. So Trump has gotten ahead of this. He's agreed to 3 debates, September 4th, September 10th, September 25th. The September 4th debate being on Fox News. September 10th was like ABC, and then the 25th was NBC. And Kamala Harris, from the looks of it, is running scared from Fox News. Of course, she agrees to the September 10th debate with liberal ABC or NBC, but she won't agree to the original, what Trump proposed, which is just great. You've got like 3 debates in the span of 3 weeks, but she is afraid of Fox News. Remember the whole liberal charade narrative. Trump's afraid to debate, and now he puts out 3 debates now, and apparently she only agreed to 1. Now maybe it'll come out and she'll agree to all of them, but this is big stuff. Trump had a longer press conference talking about it. Trump just destroyed a fake news reporter asking him if he's worried about Kamala's crowd sizes. Well, yeah, and Trump was right here. This is the point. Trump will go to an arena, he'll sell it out with like 17,000, but then there'll be another 30,000 surrounding it. So he gets like 40 to 50,000 per arena because it overflows, like legitimately. And they don't even talk about that. Kamala Harris gets like 300 people at a tarmac. They have to AI edit the photo to put in more people. That's what they're doing now. I'll show it. It's just totally edited. You can tell it's AI. It's
doing
fake.
it several times.
So they're talking about, oh, she's got these huge crowd sizes. And we know why. They tell them, oh, it's a free concert. They're going to shake their ass. It's going to be a rapper or whatever. And then they have to edit them like right here. Well, let's talk about this. Trump agrees to 3 debates on the 4th with Fox, the 10th with NBC, the 25th with ABC. Very charitable from Trump. Very charitable in terms of the 3 debates. You've got 1 right-leaning debate with Fox and then really 2 liberal networks there when it comes to it. So the fact that she only agreed to the 10th, at least right now, and maybe she will duck the Fox debate altogether, it is pretty pathetic if that does end up happening. I hope all 3 debates happen. I originally said I thought there was going to be 2 debates. The fact that there's 3, this is great news. I always wanted the debates. Another thing that Trump talked about, and it confirmed what people were wondering about his campaign strategy. You know, JD Vance right now is taking a lot of heat from some conservatives. Trump is taking heat from some conservatives for not going out and campaigning. They're angry right now because the polls have gotten so close. That was always going to happen. But there is a bit of an issue with Trump basically doing nothing this week, and then people wondering why go to Montana to help with the Senate race. You should be in the Rust Belt. You should be in Arizona, Nevada. Well, Trump basically said that he's waiting for the DNC to end. Now, the problem is it's come out that the liberal strategy, at least the rumor, is that they want to hide Kamala Harris from any type of huge media session where she has to answer legitimate questions from the media to where they actually question her on stuff. They want to hide her. And so she comes out unscathed going into the DNC so their funding apparatus can really ramp up and they'll raise a lot of money potentially at least tied with Trump in terms of the polls, although Trump did get some good polls today. There were some ridiculous, erroneous Marquette polls yesterday that are going to skew the averages, of course. But there are some good polls today. But really, they're trying to get her to the DNC unscathed. Vance and Trump need to come out every day and say, she's not answering any questions. She's not answering any questions. She's not answering any questions. You have to embarrass her. And also Walz as well. Although, to be fair, Walz is, I think he's in Iraq right now. Oh, wait, he never went to Iraq. I'm sorry. I'm sorry. That was my mistake. I don't know. But so that's what's going on. And we do also have this. This is total AI. You can tell. I don't know what this generator is saying. There's a 92% chance this is AI. So this is what not the Harris campaign tweeted, but I think a few of their followers to try and make it seem like it's huge. So these, you look at like 200, actually, these all might be fake. All of these fans, I think, are fake. I believe this part of the photo is real. The plane that was in Wisconsin, and then she got off and did the rally. These might be real people, but all of these people in the darkness they're all fake. And you can easily tell they're fake when you look at like some of them. As you get closer to them, you see like the focus on them. It's like they're drawing. It's like a realistic painting, if you will. But this entire photo might actually be fake. I'm not totally sure, but at least all of these people are completely fake. There's 92% chance. No, it's 100% chance it's artificial. Whatever system this is dumb. This should be able to. I can tell with a naked eye from here, looking at a small image like that this is fake. So it's not a 92% chance. That algorithm, if you're scanning something and saying, is this real or fake, it's not worth a damn if it doesn't come back and it can tell that this is 100% a fake altered photo that's just not real. So they're lying about their crowds. They have to use the AI. They have to use rappers, things like that. And the other thing I was saying when it came to Trump's strategy, I didn't finish trying to go back to it. So basically, Trump.
Hello, public opinion aficionados, and welcome to Rasmussen Reports, where we prove time and time again the value of independent polling and media. And today is one of those times. It's the time when information ops are being thrown at you faster and faster. And without people like us, please subscribe to the channel on YouTube if you haven't already. How would you know that you were being gaslit to? Just a month ago, we had the, no, don't believe your eyes. There was no way Trump was actually shot. To then a senator who served his country in the Marine Corps is totally weird, guys. To Kamala Harris is the second coming of Barack Obama. And now the one you're subject to is Kamala Harris is actually winning in the polls. And I'm here to tell you she really isn't. But the first place we're going to go to look into whether she is or not is the Real Clear Politics polling aggregate. This is the aggregate that Rasmussen Reports endorses. We think the other people are pretty dodgy. So anyways, this is the way the website looked this morning. And if you see what we have here, the last 6 polls, a solid wall of blue with Kamala Harris winning from 1 to 4 points and putting her up 0.8 points in the aggregate. Now, right off the top, I'll tell you, even if she was winning 0.8 points, that's still a horrible sign for Democrats showing an utter collapse. Look up here, this day in history, 4 years ago, Joe Biden was winning by over 7 points more. And 8 years ago, Hillary Clinton was winning by a whopping 8 points more than Kamala Harris theoretically is today. The second thing I'd point out to you here is that there's only one other poll up here that is likely voters. Everybody else is polling registered voters. We've gone into that before. Another thing is that many of these organizations are corporate entities or have a deep well of public funding. We are, in my honest opinion, the only pollsters on here whose business will shut down if we fail to be accurate. In fact, all of the funding for the numbers I'm going to talk about today came solely from subscription and advertising revenue. Do you think Morning Consult is worried about subscription or advertising revenue? They absolutely 100% are not. Also, with how tight the race has been, I'm really surprised that there are no other polls that show Trump up at all. Now, I can't know the internals of every single one of these polls and what they're potentially doing wrong. And even in their disclosures, you wouldn't be able to know. But don't you find it suspicious that even though Joe Biden, we've been told, has been losing recently in the polls, and all of Joe Biden's administration, we've been told that Kamala Harris is less likable than him, and here she is winning all of a sudden? Let me tell you, if there was 1 week in this entire election cycle where you were going to get the most bang for your buck by putting out a crap poll, this would be the week. And I think you would find a lot of stuff like that. Things you'll find potentially is an increase in Democrat weighting in these polls week over week. Maybe they had less Democrat weighting 2 or 3 weeks ago with Biden. I'm sure you'll find some polls where maybe they threw out more survey respondents than they did in the past. They can also do things like play with the mix of where all their online panel results come from. And another thing I'm seeing here is, believe it or not, we're talking now the morning of August 8th, and the most recent polling is only out the 4th. And most of the stuff here is almost a week old. In fact, half of it is a week old. Don't you think that's kind of crazy too? Didn't you expect there'd be more polling after this historic shift in Democrat candidates? Maybe if you find a result you want, you just sort of hang on to those numbers and let it drift. But not Rasmussen Reports. We're putting out numbers every Thursday for the rest of the election season, and we're going to show you the overnight results as they develop as well. One final point here, don't be swayed by sample size. You may not have had this explained to you, but there is a difference between accuracy and precision. And here's a pretty good example. This is precise and accurate. All of the shots are hitting the target. A larger poll is going to be more precise, meaning it's going to have less of a margin of error and more repeatable results. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that poll or that pollster or that methodology doesn't have an accuracy problem. And that's what we're seeing in the lower right hand here. Really precise shots, but not on the target. Anyways, here is how the Real Clear Politics aggregate looks now, and we're tipping our hand a little bit, but now there are 2 new polls showing Trump up, and one of those is ours, and you can see the results right there. We're going to get into crosstabs in a minute, but it looks like CNBC came out with a poll that has Trump up too as well, although I will state we are the only data on this page that is more recent than August the 4th. Now, another thing I want to talk about quick is Polymarket's betting prediction. And this is basically people come in and bet who they think is going to win the presidency, and it swings all over the place. It shows something kind of different than pollsters. People say that this is more accurate because people are betting with their actual money. I don't know about that, because pretty much every market on earth is manipulated. But what is interesting to me is back almost 2 weeks ago when Kamala Harris became the candidate, the betting markets actually stayed kind of steady with Trump up about 20 to 25 points. But then all of a sudden, about August 2nd, and even more the 3rd through the 4th, Trump lost his lead, and Kamala Harris is now tied with Trump on the betting site. Now, I'm sure these things lag and take time to swing as well, but what it appears perhaps is that even though people look to the betting sites for up-to-the-minute expectations of who's going to win, and even though some people, in my opinion, erroneously say this is more accurate, it looks to me like all of that pro-Kamala Harris polling is what moved the betting markets. But anyway, let's get into the crosstabs of our latest release. This is August 1st and 4th through 7th, so a total of 5 nights of results. If the 2024 election were between Vice President Kamala Harris and former President Donald Trump, who would you vote for? 49% say Donald Trump, 44% say Kamala Harris. So Trump is leading by 5 points in a 2-way matchup and still taking home 49 or 50% of the vote, which is quite frankly where he's been. And Kamala Harris or Joe Biden has been pretty much in the mid to low 40s. Donald Trump is now winning again among women by 3 points, is winning again among 18 to 39-year-olds by 5 points, is winning a little bit less among middle-aged voters. That could be noise of the poll. is still taking home 30% of the black vote, is absolutely crushing it by 15 points among Hispanic voters. And listen, I'll be honest, these are national polls. There's really no way I can also cue in specifically to try and get an exact sample of what the Hispanic population is. You know, there's Spanish-speaking Hispanics. There's Hispanics that don't necessarily consider themselves Hispanic. It's really nebulous, moving thing. But I mean, you know, this is massively up here. If Trump beats Kamala Harris among Hispanics, it will be absolutely historic, because keep in mind, they've been telling us that this influx of immigration over the southern border is going to create a permanent Democrat supermajority. And we are seeing nothing of the type, folks. But here are the party numbers, and Kamala Harris is only taking home 80% of the Democrat vote, but Donald Trump's taking home 84% of the Republican vote. So Trump's up 71 points among Republicans, and Kamala Harris is up 66 points among Democrats. So that's a 5-point crossover advantage in Donald Trump's favor. And Donald Trump is back to leading among independent voters by double digits. Here, a 13-point majority. And I've been watching the independents most closely and telling you over and over again, Kamala Harris cannot win without winning a majority of independents. And when you do things like pander to your leftist base or pick super left vice presidential candidates, you are not helping yourself with independents. We've been talking a bit about the economy too. I thought this income signal was pretty interesting. Donald Trump leads with every single human being that makes less than $200,000 a year. Kamala Harris does best with the upper income crowds by a massive margin, but she also loses least by the under 30,000 crowd, showing that her base is mostly comprised of the elite and most likely recipients of federal aid. Here are the multi-way matchups, and last time it was about 1.5 points, but Donald Trump is back up to a 5-point lead in the multi-way matchup. Pretty sure I was correct when I called that last result noise. Kennedy is only taking home 3% of the vote, which is the first time we've seen a 3% number for him in one of our major polls. This is about 1,800 likely voters. Nobody in the world is voting for any of these third-party characters. That is insane. But again, it's because we've been telling you this is mostly a referendum on MAGA versus the Democrat machine. Most of the numbers look the same here, which I like. It makes it more consistent, although Hispanic voters go less for Donald Trump because they seem to support RFK quite a bit here. And Donald Trump still has an 11-point lead among independent voters, with RFK taking only 6% of independents. Now, numbers are great, but I also have some charts for you that, in my opinion, show exactly what's going on here. This is the nightly Kamala Harris versus Donald Trump tracker, where we treat each night as its own individual poll so that we can see trend data. And you will not see any trend data like this coming from any other pollster on earth, because they're just doing one massive weekly poll and then throwing that garbage over the fence. And here we show that when Kamala Harris was first anointed as the new Democrat candidate without any primary votes, there was some initial reticence, and Donald Trump was winning by 16 points. But because of the positive press, because of the Obama endorsement, she actually rapidly gained ground, and for a few nights was beating Donald Trump in our nightly matchups. But since then, her support has faded, and Donald Trump has very rapidly climbed back. Now, again, because there are smaller samples, because of the larger margin of error, these things do have noise. But now for the first time, I've added a 3-period moving average on here, and you really can see the Kamala Harris bounce and its rapid petering out, for lack of a better word. Here are all the direct Kamala Harris and Joe Biden versus Donald Trump polls from this entire cycle, and you can see the challenge of polling presidential races early in the cycle, they really swing all over the place and didn't solidify till about January. And despite all of the chaos, really, we're only got 5 data points over here to the right, which happened after Joe Biden's debate. You can see very clearly that Donald Trump's support has really lasered in on that 49% number. And it looks like Kamala Harris is sort of topping out at about 44% now. And the margin of errors are tracked on here in the dotted lines. And Donald Trump's victory is outside of the margin of error pretty comfortably. Now, you may not have followed us before. You may not have heard us respond to the slanders of right-wing polling. We're not right-wing pollsters. We want to be accurate, and we think our polling from the last 2 presidential matchups proves that we were accurate. These are the 5-period moving averages from all of our polling in 2016 and 2020 and now this year. In 2016, you can see we hit it. Our polling average was almost exactly on the final reported popular vote margin. In 2020, believe it or not, the average of our polling actually leaned a little bit over 1.5 points to left and was too favorable to Joe Biden. During that cycle, we were weighted Democrat +4. We're actually weighted Democrat +2 right now. So in our opinion, we've removed any left-wing bias that we had and should be dead accurate right now. And if you look at what's happening, you can really see the state of the race. Donald Trump started in 2016 with about 40% of the electorate. In 2020, he was taking home about 44% of the electorate. And now he is up to 48 to 49% solidly and comfortably in this race. And the Democrats, their support has collapsed. Joe Biden really did come out of nowhere in 2020 and take just a huge amount of electoral support. But right now, Biden and Harris is polling just about the same as Hillary Clinton did back in 2016. And we all know what happened there. Now, you can also see this blue line shooting up at the end. Kamala Harris, her support has been going up, but these are a little shifted because of the way the moving average works. So her climb isn't as severe as it appears in this chart. Now, I'm going to pull these charts out. We haven't looked at them in a while, but these are all updated. These are the 5-period moving averages for all of the demographics that the Democrats do not want to lose. And right now, it appears that Donald Trump is really solidly winning among Hispanic and other race voters by a massive margin. I mean, the average is comfortably a 10-point lead for Trump. And that you can say, all right, well, your poll might be a little too favorable to Republicans among Hispanic voters. We did show them roughly tied in 2020, and we showed Hillary Clinton winning massively among Hispanic voters in 2016. Here are the results for 18 to 39-year-old voters. Again, a demographic group that historically has leaned very left, and it shows them voting for Hillary Clinton by massive margin. This is basically over a 20-point advantage for Hillary Clinton. They won. Joe Biden won them by something a little bit closer to 4 or 5 points. But here we have Trump up solidly about, 3 or 4 points now in this cycle. So they have hemorrhaged 18 to 39-year-old support. And finally, here's the one nobody really wants to talk about at all. And Trump is now losing by less than 30 points among Black voters. And that is absolutely horrendous. The Democrats really can't afford to lose any more support among Black voters, but just look at the blue and the red lines historically over the last 12 years. They have been hemorrhaging support here. So that's it, folks. It looks like the corporate media may be lying to you, maybe cherry picking left-leaning polls. Maybe some people are putting their thumbs on the scale when otherwise they normally might not be. But I can tell you, we are not putting our thumbs in the scale. Take a step back and look at this. Donald Trump has been massively beating Joe Biden, not just in our polling, but in a lot of people's polling almost this entire year. The entire time, everybody tells you that Kamala Harris is viewed as incompetent, has lower favorability numbers than Joe Biden, and has never outperformed him in polling. Now, all of a sudden, we're expected to be that she's doing 3 to 4 points better than Joe Biden in the aggregates.
They're lying.
It does not hold water. If you want someone trustworthy and independent to tell you,
well, you ain't got to wait much longer. Here it is.
NBC's Nnamdi Egwuonwu reports that the protesters were shouting, "Kamala, you can't hide, you're supporting genocide." And this is how the vice president responded.
I told y'all, just because Joe Biden say he's not going to run, that don't mean that the people who called him Genocide Joe is going to accept Kamala. They not. Now they're telling her, you can't hide. You've been supporting genocide. And she going crazy. They're going to make sure she don't win.
I'm here because we believe in democracy. Everyone's voice matters, but I am speaking now. You know what? If you want Donald Trump to win, then say that. Otherwise, I'm speaking.
It looks like the people in the audience were very happy with the way Kamala responded to the chance of you can't hide, you committed genocide or something like that. Huh. See, here's the thing about it is, yeah, they are kind of doing that, aren't they? I mean, she is a part of an administration that is funding a genocide. It's amazing how many people in the audience don't give a damn. Because, you know, we got to fight for democracy. And Kamala's way of dealing with that is saying, hey, you want to help Trump. Nah, if they want to help Trump, maybe they'd be at a Trump rally. They're at a Democratic rally because they're not Republicans. Maybe they are Democrats and they're wondering why they should vote for you, or you're their last hope. You know, as a Democrat who runs on, well, used to run on peace, not so much anymore. What I'm finding as I'm looking at the cable news media as they cover this, of course, the Republicans can't cover it because they would probably do the same thing, if not worse. Listen to the way Lawrence O'Donnell fawned over this Kamala Harris treatment of the protester.
Yeah, they try to make it just as her being very strong.
The strength of that stare is more powerful than anything I've ever seen a candidate do in a moment like that. No presidential candidate has ever handled a moment like that better than Kamala Harris.
Interesting, because, you know, a lot of candidates do get heckled. I've seen it happen a number of times. Remember that time when Hillary Clinton got heckled? The black lady, the black sister approached her with the Black Lives Matter thing and brought up her history of super predator comments that she made in the 90s. Remember that?
Got to lay down these markers. You got to build toward common sense gun reform, criminal justice reform, and all the like. So I think we've got a very, we've got somebody saying here, we have to bring them
apologize for mass
to
incarceration.
heel. Okay, we'll talk
I'm
about
not a super predator.
Hillary Clinton. Okay, fine, we'll talk about it.
You apologize to Black people for mass incarceration?
Well, can I talk, and then maybe you can listen to what I say? Okay, thank you very much. There's a lot of issues in this campaign. The very first speech that I gave back in April was about criminal justice reform and about
predators.
You're being good.
It's not appropriate. This is not appropriate. That's true.
Yeah, you want to hear the facts, you just want to talk.
I know that you called Black people super predators.
Yeah, you call Black people super predators.
Explain it to us. You owe Black people an apology.
Excuse us. That's an inappropriate.
This is how you supposed to confront Hillary and Joe.
Give me a chance to talk. I'll do something. You know what? Nobody's ever asked me before. You're the first person to ask me, and I'm happy to address it.
Nobody else.
Let's go.
Okay, back to the issues. The issues.
Hillary handled that badly. You know, she could have spoke to the issue just like Kamala could have spoke to the issue. But why would you do that? You know, maybe the protester wouldn't have been asking those questions if Kamala would have been taking questions. If Kamala would be having interviews. Maybe if Kamala spoke to Israel on the issues. And remember, Kamala is still part of an administration. She is a vice president as we speak. And this is our policy to fund this genocide. She's exactly, this is even further than the presidential candidates who run for office who aren't in public office. Moving on from Hillary Clinton, what about the other candidates who've had to deal with the same type of thing? What about, I don't know, Bernie Sanders?
Bernie Sanders got into his Social Security speech at Westlake Park.
Thank you, Seattle, for being one of the most progressive cities in the United States of America.
Moments later, Black Lives Matter activists rushed the stage.
We are trying. We're going to let you on the mic.
Activists who last year shut down a holiday tree lighting in the same park today prevented the most progressive candidate for president from speaking to thousands of people who came to hear him.
I came here to join this rally and watch what was going on, not to listen to somebody take over the stage.
As the crowd called for activists to step aside, Sanders waited patiently.
We are shutting. We will shut it down.
After about 20 minutes, Sanders' wife, Jane, appeared to give the signal it was time to go. Soon after, they left the stage.
It was just disrespectful.
Well, I think it's unfortunate because, among other things, I wanted to talk about the issue of Black lives. The fact that the American people are tired of seeing unarmed African Americans shot and killed. But there are other issues as well that we have to talk about.
Yeah, I don't know if that was a better way to handle it. I think that Bernie should not have let them or allowed them to push him off the stage. I mean, you can let them speak if you want to let them speak, and then respond to their comments. And then once you've done that, be like, okay, that's it, time to roll. Got to get back to all these other people that came out to see me. So yeah, I think that Bernie could have handled that better. I said so at the time, but still, you know, I think dismissive is not the way to go. Especially when you're trying to get votes. Dismissive isn't the way to go as a public servant because you kind of work for the people. That's sort of the deal. That's the agreement. And then, you know, just as the optics of it, usually it wouldn't go over well. But since Kamala's up against Trump, I don't think they're going to say she did anything wrong no matter what she does. I truly believe she could probably shoot somebody in the front of in the middle of Pennsylvania Avenue, and they'd still vote for her. The liberals, you know what I'm saying? But Lawrence O'Donnell used very strong language when he said that she did the best that he's ever heard, the best that's ever been done. What was his exact words again, guys? Hold on, bear with me, guys.
The strength of that stare is more powerful than anything I've ever seen a candidate do in a moment like that. No presidential candidate has ever handled a moment like that better than Kamala Harris.
Yeah, he said it's the best he's ever seen it handled before. No one's ever That's right. He said it was the best he's ever seen. No candidate's ever handled a protester moment, an outburst moment better than Kamala Harris. I can remember at least one politician that handled it better at least 2 times, all live, unscripted. And he even responded to the words.
George Bush.
Instead of just giving them the stone face. That's so amazing. Remember John McCain 2008? Lawrence, you remember John McCain 2008. You've only been doing political reporting for the last 40 years. I'm sure you remember back 15 years ago.
We're scared. We're scared of an Obama presidency, and I'll tell you why. I'm concerned about someone that cohorts with domestic terrorists such as Ayers.
I have to tell you, he is a decent person and a person that you do not have to be scared as president of the United States. Now, look, I
got to ask you a question. I do not believe in, I can't trust Obama. I have read about him, and he's an Arab. He is not. No,
man.
She said he's an Arab. How you? She went a Muslim, but they got some good old bigots in there. It's just something about that Obama. He's an Arab. McCain, like, oh my God, y'all gonna do this racist shit on my motherfucking live?
He's a decent family man, citizen that I just happen to have disagreements with on fundamental issues, and that's what this campaign is all about. He's not. Thank you.
Wow.
He lost the race.
Yes, look,
he lost
our
the race.
politics sure has changed, hasn't it?
He lost the race. He was naked next to this. Obama was a pretty good man and all that. They said, "Oh yeah, well, why we vote for you then? If the color is so good."
Yeah, Trump would have roasted her. No, he would have applauded her. He'd have said, maybe he is. It's possible he could be. I don't know. We should look into that. And Kamala would just I don't know what she would have done. Probably wouldn't have done anything. I don't think she would have defended at all the integrity of Donald Trump. Not in a million years, man. But I'm saying those people are interrupting the flow of the discourse. I mean, I think John McCain did an admirable job. But you know what happened in all these 3 instances? They all lost. Bernie lost, Hillary lost, and of course, John McCain lost. It was an opportunity I think Kamala had to address the genocide issue. It's right there. People can hear it. You haven't done questions. Like I said, you haven't done interviews. Maybe it's time to say something besides your stump speech. But if all you got to do is give people the evil eye and tilt your head, I mean, if that's all it takes is doing stereotypical like black faces or something, and that conveys strength, if that's the truth, all black people have really great jobs because we all can do that face. Hell, anybody can. That's all it takes. And you've given the best response ever in the history of responses. I need to start doing that more often. Maybe I'll try that with the cops next time. I'm speeding. You know, Nina Turner responded to this, I think, in the best fashion, explaining exactly what's going on with the protesters. Because, of course, there were people that said, oh, they're just trying to help Trump. And, oh, my favorite, why don't they go to a Trump rally? Nina Turner said, hey, people are in a lot of pain. They want the death and destruction in Gaza to end. Death and destruction our government is funding. This response is inappropriate and lacks empathy. People do not want Trump to win. They want the genocide to end. She also went on later in a subsequent tweet to say, you know, Kamala Harris and Tim Walz are not on a victory tour. They're campaigning for votes. That's what they're doing. I think some of the supporters who are happy as hell bouncing off the walls in anticipation that this is a victory lap, they need to remember that it ain't November. Put in the comment section what you think about this video. Give me a 1 if you think that
Hey, come see us on tour. We'll be in Chicago, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Duluth, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, Jacksonville, Florida, Tempe, Arizona, and Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets. So today we're going to be talking about this guy. He's the new vice presidential pick from Minnesota. And do you know that that guy is 1 year older than me? I don't know. He looks like he's 80. Am I wrong about that? Do I not look like I think? Anyway, it doesn't matter. I just think that's fun. Okay, I got to get over here. So I just want to just give you a little background on what's up with this guy. Governor Tim Walz. Walz. Doesn't it sound like it should be spelled with 2 L's and an S? But it's not. It's spelled with 1 L and 1 Z. Governor Tim Walz. So he tweeted this in April of last year. This morning, I joined other governors to meet with President Volodymyr Zelensky and reaffirm our ongoing commitment to Ukraine. As Ukraine defends freedom against tyranny, Minnesota stands with our Ukrainian community and the people of Ukraine. What the F is the governor doing with this? What is there any other foreign leaders you're meeting with? Why is the governor doing that? I'll tell you what, his well, by the way, I guess the governor doesn't know anything about what's happening. Again, I have to remind people the reason why there was an invasion is because it was provoked by NATO and by Ukraine. Ukraine and the CIA overthrew their democratically elected president in 2014, installed a puppet. The people in the eastern part of Ukraine did go along with that coup government, and so Ukraine started shelling those people, the Russian ethnic people and the Russian speakers, and they had peace agreements. Ukraine broke both of them. The peace agreements they had with Russia, they also broke. And why did they do that? They did that just so they could build up their military, because the NATO has been trying to get a war with Russia going for like 10 years. It's probably more than that. But here it is. We're here. And one of the big things was that, as Mark Kalifatis reminds us, in 1990, when Gorbachev returned to occupied East Germany for the purpose of that nation's reunification, he was promised that NATO would not expand 1 inch to the east. That was 16 new NATO states ago. Yeah. So here, let's watch. There it is. There's the classified document that reveals that. This is what NATO looks like. Look at that. And Ukraine. So they were threatening. Kamala Harris went and gave a speech saying, we're going to put Ukraine in NATO. And that was the one thing that Putin couldn't cotton to. So he also invaded not to start a war, but to end a war. And I'm just showing this so you know that Governor Tim Walz is a warmongering puppet of the military-industrial class, or the military-industrial complex, just like Kamala Harris, just like Joe Biden, just like the entire Democratic Party, and most of the Republican Party. Not all of them, most of them. So it's a uniparty thing, once again. So I just want to remind you that these people are the opposite of being Democrats. They're pro-war, they're anti-free speech, they're pro-censorship, they're anti-bodily autonomy, they're pro-forced medical experiments. Remember, at censorship, well, we're going to get to that part, is the hallmark of dictators. So, and as Mark points out, the world is catching on that the United States are the warmongers. People in America are catching on. Biden is the Nord Stream bomber, and by Seymour Hersh. That's right. The Western populations are awakening to the sinister agenda of their elite. And who said that? Vladimir Putin. He said that February 21st, 2023. So, again, this idea that somehow this Tim Walz is some kind of a progressive or a lefty, he might be a progressive compared to, Joe Biden and Hitler, someone who's funding a genocide, someone who's vowed to veto universal health care, someone who's funding another war, a proxy war with a nuclear power, someone who's right now today bombing Syria again, bombing Yemen again. So maybe in some weird way, Tim Walz is to the left of somebody in America, but he's not a what I grew up with thinking of what a Democrat was or a liberal was. That's not what he is. He's a pro-war, pro-censorship maniac. And he wanted people to snitch on each other during COVID, just like I was told they did in Russia when I was a kid. They would say, oh, the thing about Russia is Russia wants you to snitch on each other to the government. That's what Tim Walz wanted people to do in Minnesota. So this is just a very quick background on who Tim Walz actually is.
I believe having a substantial percentage of see us on tour. We'll be in Chicago, Grand Rapids, Michigan, Duluth, Georgia, right outside of Atlanta, Jacksonville, Florida, Tempe, Arizona, and Burbank, California. Go to jimmydore.com for a link for those tickets.
Hey, guess what? Breaking news. Joe Biden's FBI just raided Scott Ritter's residence. The video on the right explains the proximate reason for this. The State Department funds Ukraine's kill list of information terrorists, and Scott has topped that list many times. I'm on that list. But the fact checkers would say that's not true. They'll say that there is no Ukraine kill list. That's what they say. I've seen fact checkers say that over and over. So they must be true. That must be right, and we must be wrong, even though we were always turned out to be right, and they're always turned out to be wrong when it comes to everything. But here, let's go to the next video, I guess. Let's go see what this video says. So there they are. The FBI shows up. Scott Ritter, he's a real enemy of America. The weapons inspector, the guy telling you the truth about Ukraine, telling you the truth about Gaza, telling you the truth about Syria. He's the problem. Okay. Let me go over here and see. Here, maybe Scott will tell us.
Well, I think we've gotten to the point where it's gone beyond perverted parody. When the Israelis jail 9 soldiers for raping Palestinian prisoners, and then Israeli citizens rise up and say that the Talmud interpretation of a Jewish law says it's not a crime to rape non-Jews and that these men should be freed. Not only that, then they send hundreds of people to the Palestinian prisons demanding to be allowed in so they can rape the Palestinian prisoners because they're permitted to under Jewish law. This led to a near civil war in Israel where soldiers were facing off against soldiers. This isn't bad Hollywood movie. This isn't the preface to some sort of zombie apocalypse. This is reality happening in Israel right now. Our ally. We claim that Israel and America is alike in many ways. I don't know, when was the last time 500 American citizens stormed a state prison saying we need to be allowed in to rape the prisoners because we're permitted to under our religious beliefs. So that's happening in Israel as we speak. The 9 soldiers were released now from custody with a crime because apparently in Israel, raping prisoners is no longer a crime. That's just one thing. They're blowing up. They blew up a school today with students in it. The school burned. The students were inside the school burning to death. The parents were outside listening as their children screamed as they were burned to death. That happens on a daily basis. What Israel has become literally the worst incarnation of what we could imagine Nazi Germany was like back in the day. I mean, and some people even say that even the Nazis weren't this bad. I don't go quite that way. I think killing millions of people in horrific fashion is as bad as it gets. But I think Israel's approximating the scope and scale of that behavior.
So when you say things like that, I guess I guess things like this happen. The FBI shows up and they start searching your house. So if you tell the truth, you remember when I went to the UN and I gave testimony about the Nord Stream pipeline and the real cause of the Ukraine war at the Security Council at the UN. I was immediately, they used Pegasus to tap into my computer and my phone. So they got me. So they got everything that I had on my computer, everything that's on my phone. Who knows? They could be listening on me at any moment, at any time. And so that's what they did to me just for giving testimony one time at the UN. So remember they wouldn't let him on the plane? They went and they grabbed him. They took him off a plane. The FBI took him off a plane. Wouldn't let him go to Russia to that economic summit, which is a much bigger economic summit than Davos. But they wouldn't let him do it. So they're coming at him. That's Joe Biden's FBI is coming at Scott Ritter hard. And for lying? No, for telling you the truth. Remember, lying gets you promoted. Telling the truth gets your house raided by the FBI. It gets you thrown in a Belmarsh prison. It gets your computer hacked by Pegasus and the CIA. That's what telling the truth gets you. It gets you kicked off of Fox News, even if you're the #1 show. Remember, Tucker didn't get fired for lying. He got fired because he started telling the truth. They took away all his advertisers. And there was nothing to tie his hands anymore. And he got used to telling the truth, and they can't have that. So we should get to talk. I'd love to get Scott Ritter on as soon as possible. Talk to him, get his take on this. But they're coming for him hard. It's crazy what's going on.
Hey, come see us.
While war correspondents and numerous Telegram and YouTube channels continue to wonder what is really happening in the Kursk region, Chief of the General Staff of the Russian Federation Valery Gerasimov gave some details of what is happening. In particular, at a meeting with Russian President Vladimir Putin, the head of the General Staff officially announced that on August 6, at 5:30 a.m. Moscow time, units of the Ukrainian armed forces, numbering up to 1,000 people, went on the offensive in the Kursk region in order to capture a section of the Sudzansky district territory. According to General Gerasimov, the coordinated actions of units of the Russian armed forces, together with border guards, combat aircraft, artillery, and missile troops, stopped the enemy's advance deep into Russian territory. The head of the Russian General Staff officially confirmed that over the past 24 hours, the losses of the armed forces of Ukraine in the Kursk region amounted to 315 people and 54 units of various armored vehicles, including 7 tanks. At the same time, it is worth noting that some Russian Telegram channels, even despite the official statements of the Chief of the General Staff Valery Gerasimov, continue to state that the armed forces of Ukraine allegedly managed to take the city of Sudza into an operational encirclement. According to them, the tanks of the Ukrainian army have allegedly already come close to the city of Sudza and are firing direct fire at this settlement. These Russian Telegram channels claim that the 22nd and 88th Mechanized Brigades of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, armed with NATO equipment and actively supported by air defense and heavy artillery, are involved in the attacks on the city of Sudza. Meanwhile, Ukrainian sources do not so eloquently describe the events in the Kursk region as Russian telegram channels. In particular, employees of the Ukrainian Internet Resource Deep State, which is supervised by the head of the main intelligence directorate of the Ministry of Defense of Ukraine, General Kirill Budanov, said that for the safety of the personnel of the armed forces of Ukraine, they would not update the map of combat operations in the Kursk region. Moreover, Ukrainian telegram channels began to show an interview with an officer of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, who, on condition of anonymity, said that the Russian army had managed to stabilize the front in the Sudza direction. According to him, the Russian troops managed to dislodge the units of the Armed Forces of Ukraine from the western suburbs of this city. At the same time, an officer of the General Staff of the Armed Forces of Ukraine noted that over the past 48 hours, the Ukrainian army allegedly managed to capture 183 square kilometers of Russian territory. Thus, as you can see, Russian and Ukrainian sources give completely different information about what is happening in the Kursk region. It is quite obvious that the information coming from Russian and Ukrainian sources is overflowing with disinformation. The only thing that can be confidently said is that in the Kursk region, over the past 48 hours, the warring parties have actively and intensively used the entire range of conventional weapons, including missile weapons, as well as combat aircraft and artillery systems. At the moment, as of August 9, 2024, the armed forces of Ukraine and the Russian army adhere to information silence. Over the past 24 hours, the warring parties have not published a single fresh geotagged photo or video. War correspondents from both sides publish only text messages based only on rumors and on allegedly their own sources. This means that information coming from them has not been verified and is not credible right now. In general, analyzing the available information from both sides, one gets the impression that as of August 9, 2024, the armed forces of Ukraine no longer has the strength for a further offensive in the Kursk region, and that the Ukrainian High Military Command will have to introduce additional reserves to continue supporting this adventure. By the way, commenting on what is happening in the Kursk region, Western military experts said that the offensive of the armed forces of Ukraine in this direction of the front makes no sense from a military point of view. In particular, a military expert from the Finnish analytical center Blackbird Group, Pasi Purainen, said that the attack of the Ukrainian army on the Kursk region would not distract Russian troops from other directions of the front, since the Russian army has powerful and numerous reserves in the Kursk region. Moreover, the expert also questioned the ability of the armed forces of Ukraine to capture any locality in the Kursk region. From an operational and strategic point of view, the attack of the Ukrainian army on the Kursk region makes absolutely no sense. It looks like a gross waste of human resources and heavy equipment, which are so necessary for the armed forces of Ukraine in other directions of the front, military expert Pasi Purainen said. Meanwhile, former president of the Russian Federation and deputy chairman of the Russian Security Council, Dmitry Medvedev, also commented on what is happening in the Kursk region. According to Medvedev, everything that is happening in the Kursk region is a terrorist operation of the Kiev regime, which will not go unanswered. Dmitry Medvedev noted that the events in the Kursk region caused important political and legal consequences. From this moment on, the special military operation should acquire an openly extraterritorial character. This is no longer just an operation to punish the Nazis and return the historical lands of Russia. We need to immediately begin the liberation of Odessa, Kharkiv, Dnipropetrovsk, Nikolaev, and Kiev. The Russian army should have no restrictions on the destruction of the Ukrainian Reich. Let everyone realize this, including the United States and Britain. We will stop only when we consider it acceptable and profitable for ourselves, Dmitry Medvedev said. Thus, Dmitry Medvedev once again stressed that Moscow will stop only when the central and southern parts of Ukraine return to their native harbor, and will again become part of the Russian Federation.
Judge Andrew Napolitano here for Judging Freedom. Today is Thursday, August 8th, 2024, 50 years to the day since the resignation of Richard Nixon from the presidency. It's time for our Intelligence Community Roundtable. It's not quite the end of the week. It's almost the end of the week. It's almost the end of the day. But scheduling has forced us to do this now. Ray McGovern and Larry Johnson join us now. Gentlemen, thank you very much for your time and the double duty that you always both give the viewers and me on this program. We have a lot to discuss. I'd like to start by talking about the unfortunate events at the home of our dear friend and colleague, Scott Ritter, yesterday. My understanding is that a federal search warrant was served by a team of about 20 FBI agents on Scott Ritter's home. According to what Scott said afterwards, they were polite, they were professional, they didn't do any damage, but they took a lot of material from him, including his archives, including his work as the UN chief weapons inspector, including all of his electronic devices, and including the draft he had written of an as yet, of course, unpublished book, since they took the draft of it. The way this works is someone, usually an FBI agent, on the basis of some information, submits an affidavit prepared by the U.S. attorney to a federal judge or a federal magistrate judge, and the magistrate judge signs the search warrant, and then the FBI executes it. So that's all we seem to know now. I'm sure you both have thoughts on this. Ray, I'll start with you.
Well, I just think it's absurd. They are accusing Scott, apparently, of having violated the Foreign Agent Registration Act. And they're saying that he's working for the Russian government, when Scott admits quite freely that when RT pays him or Sputnik pays him, just like anyone else, that's his living. He's a journalist. And the thought that he skewers his views to dovetail with Russian policy is absurd. Now, Scott has been saying for years now that Ukraine is going to win this war. Putin has been saying for years now that sorry, not Ukraine, but Russia's going to win this war. So Putin's been saying the same thing. So who's in whose pocket? Is Putin in Scott Ritter's pocket, or Scott Ritter? It happens to be true, and it's nearing completion. The same thing with Israel, and people don't realize this. Scott said early on, the Israeli army is really kind of overrated. It's not going to beat Hamas. Whoa, what heresy! Everyone thought that the Israeli army would make short work of Hamas. No, Scott knew better, okay? So they have a lot of grievances for a guy who tells the truth and deflates some of the legends that they put out for public consumption.
Larry, before you start, here's the statute. Now, it's long, so I'm going to summarize it. An agent of a foreign principal. This is FARA. This is the Foreign Agent Registration Act. An agent of a foreign principal is any person who acts as an agent, representative, employee, or servant, or otherwise acts at the order, request, or under the direction or control of a foreign principal. Foreign principal is basically a foreign government. And does any of the following: engages within the United States in political activities intended to influence the U.S. government in favor of the foreign principal, acts within the United States as a public relations publicity agent for the foreign principal, solicits, collects, disperses, or dispenses money in behalf of the foreign principal, represents the foreign principal before the federal government. I don't know how they could possibly claim that Ritter does any of that, but I'll let you weigh in, Larry. It's an earful that I just articulated, so I can repeat it if you want.
Well, it's only true if Scott has gone to work for AIPAC. So he's now for the American Israeli Public Affairs Committee, and yeah, he's guilty of not being a foreign registered agent. Well, we all know that's nonsense. The double standard here is remarkable. I mean, it shouldn't be surprising, but it is so staggering in its dimensions. When you look at what Hunter Biden actually did, and it's documented on the Hunter Biden laptop, and soliciting money, getting paid position, all to influence his father, who was the vice president, and using the big guy as the ticket to get paid from overseas. Have you seen the FBI agents going to Hunter's house to grab that material? Oh, no. And the fact that they refused to follow procedure, where normally someone, if they really thought there was a legitimate case, they would have called Scott up and said, hey, you need to register as a foreign agent. If you don't, then you're going to be in violation. That's what the government's supposed to do. Well, they didn't do that because that's not what this is about. This is about trying to shut Scott up. And anybody that, I've known Scott for about 20 years. Anybody who thinks that some foreign government can, use Scott as some marionette, some puppet, where they tell him what to talk, when to talk, and what to say. They don't know Scott. He's not known for having quiet opinions.
Right. Ray McGovern, how courageous is Scott?
I don't know of anyone who has more guts than Scott. A little wrinkle on what Larry just said. When RT was legal in this country, I used to appear regularly on RT. Of course, I never got paid for anything like that. But at one point, it occurred to me that there's something distinctive about RT, and that was this. Fox News, ABC, NBC, CBS, they all wanted to do a pre-interview interview. They wanted to know what I want to say, what I was going to say. And I was often shut down when they had somebody else. Okay, I asked on air, I said, now, it was Max Blumenthal's wife. I said, now, did you tell me, did you ask me for a pre-interview interview? And she said, well, of course not. I said, well, be advised, you guys are the only people that don't ask me for that. That's why I never give a pre-interview interview. That's why I'm delighted to be on RT. Of course, you can't see RT now on the way you used to be able to see it. You can see it on the web, and it's a very lucrative source. You have to read between the lines, but you should be an adult to be able to do that. I think I'm an adult by now.
Larry, do you think that this will have a chilling effect on others who have, not the three of us and not the people on this program, but others who have been critical of the United States government policy with respect to Russia and with respect to Israel?
Yeah, it will. I think it will in some cases, but it also is going to have, I think, the effect of drawing attention to Scott and to his message in a way that otherwise would not have happened. And all of that's going to coincide with what will be, across the board collapse of U.S. foreign policy in both Ukraine and the Middle East. So that'll make it very, very difficult to maintain the narrative that the administration's been pushing. So it's where these kinds of things backfire. I hope Scott is setting up a Give, Send, Go page where people can contribute so he can get a proper legal defense and get paid for what they're doing. Because this is, in this search warrant, they took documents that were not covered in the search warrant. Just outrageous.
Here's Scott, cut number 16.
The State Department, using
government appropriated monies for this purpose, created a Center for Countering Disinformation as an adjunct of the Ukrainian president's office. They did this in 2022. One of the first things that this Center for Countering Disinformation did, under the guidance and direction of the State Department of the United States, was to issue a blacklist of people that they called information terrorists. And on that blacklist were a large number of Americans, including myself. And this list, this center since that time, and here's the important thing about being called an information terrorist. That's a specific term being used by the Ukrainians, backed by the United States government. They said that an information terrorist must be hunted down and brought to justice the same way any terrorist would. And so I've been accused of saying things that make the Ukrainian government unhappy. They now say that I must be hunted down and arrested, detained, killed, as would any other terrorist in the world, and other Americans as well. They have made me, this center, again, with the U.S. State Department's support, has put out a list that, a weekly list where they say I'm the #1 threat to truth.
This was Scott on this show the day after the State Department had seized his passport at JFK Airport. Well, look, Scott knows what to do. He knows he needs competent counsel. He doesn't need advice from me. The defense lawyers that the feds fear the most are former federal prosecutors who have retained their national security clearances. It's a small cadre of them. They're not cheap, but they're out there. They're all over the East Coast. And Scott knows that I have advised him to seek the services of one of those people. Transitioning over, is there any news, Larry, on the assassination attempt? The most recent news that I have seen is a video of Pennsylvania State Police complaining to Secret Service that the rooftop from which crooks would shoot, this complaint was the day before, needed to be covered.
Yeah, in addition to, there's a video show from the officer's body cam. It's not really very informative. The fellow who climbed up on the roof and was confronted with crooks pointing a gun, pointing a rifle at him, and then he rapidly climbs down, runs away. The level of incompetence that was displayed by the Secret Service that day, particularly in terms of Secret Service management and leadership. The one young lady that we saw on the video who was fumbling, called her Fumbleina, fumbling to get her firearm back in the holster. She apparently was the agent in charge and had a reputation for not only being inexperienced, but incompetent. And she lived up to her reputation that day. We can say that with confidence. So this is one of those situations, as we've described before, was this a deliberate attempt to create a in order to kill Trump? And were there some broader purposes in mind? I find it interesting that they tried out immediately that this was Iran trying to kill Trump. Imagine if Trump had actually died. Would they have used that as a justification to try to whip up a war against Iran? Of course, I heard that suggestion from someone, and I said, you got to wonder at that point, all the Trump haters might be, sending, congratulatory notes to the Iranians, given how depraved they
are. Ray, wouldn't there be, in the hands of Intel, all the conversations that these cops had with each other? Wouldn't there be a way to document this, or will Intel just never admit that it has this stuff?
Well, my source for all this is Bill Binney, who knows chapter and verse about what's available to NSA. There is some question as to whether if the local cops were using a mobile device, or they were using something that was not available to the Secret Service, which is what some people are claiming. Well, why the hell was that the case? Why were they in two separate command centers. Judge, there's too many mistakes. There's too many coincidences. I asked my friend Bill Binney, Bill, you deal with probabilities as a mathematician par excellence. Tell me about how you come. This is what he said. Listen to Ray. He says, look, each of those Secret Services mistakes, look at them individually. What's the probability of each one happening? Say 10%. Okay, now consider the probability of the 5 most consequential mistakes happening at the same event, randomly. Okay, randomly. For each mistake, the random chance is 1 in 10. So that makes the aggregate for 5 mistakes 1 chance in 100,000. It's close to a 0% possibility or probability rate. So this sure doesn't look random. The math itself points to something else. Well, yeah, I mean, probabilities, they throw light on things. And I just see too many coincidences here, too many overlooked things. And I think that the real problem is that the investigation will be dominated by the FBI, which I have to say, and it's not just based on what they did to Scott yesterday. I don't trust the FBI to investigate possibly itself.
Switching gears, Larry, what do you make of the invasion by Ukrainian military into Kursk, Russia? My understanding is that the troops who did this were the best Ukraine has, whereas those back west fighting the Russian onslaught are the worst Ukraine has. What would be gained other than PR boasting by attacking civilian sites in this city in eastern Russia?
Well, let's correct your statement in one regard. It's past tense. They were the best because now they're dead. The vast majority have been killed. You're right. It is a PR stunt. It was seen as either an attempt to divert attention from the losses in the Donbass and to grab some portion of, quote, Russian territory that the Russians in the Ukrainian view would be so terrified and so fearful that they would ultimately say, oh, let's get to the negotiating table and please give us our territory back. And these guys haven't been, they're not paying attention. And this is just like the failed offensive of 2023 that started in June of 2023, where once again, these Ukrainian forces charged forward without any kind of air cover. Air is not a universal solution to every problem, but it is a critical component of combined arms activity like this. So the Russians have plenty of reinforcements. They got plenty of personnel, and they have air assets, unlike the Ukrainians. They've got drones, they've got artillery, but more importantly, they've got a lot more manpower. They killed over 600 soldiers in just that area alone yesterday and today, approaching 700. And then when you total up the ones being killed farther south, you're looking at casualties that are well into the 2,000s, almost 3,000, which is much higher loss than sustained heretofore.
That's 2,000 to 3,000 a day. Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay. Ray, would CIA have known of this planned invasion of Kursk before it happened?
Of course it would, and so would the Department of Defense. The real unexplained absurdity here is how the U.S. would encourage, or elements of the U.S. government would encourage Budanov, who is the commander of these special forces, to do this thing. What are they going to do when they get into Russia? I mean, hello, how could they possibly keep control of just a couple of square miles of territory? It's ridiculous. It makes no sense at all. And to the degree that the U.S. is in on this, and if they don't know what's happening in Ukraine, I mean, that's crazy. Of course they know. They're in the units, they're in the intelligence services and so forth. So are they encouraging Budanov? Well, I can only assume that yes, elements of the Pentagon, of the CIA of the White House are encouraging the Ukrainians to do these crazy things, which will do nothing other than to hasten their loss. Now, having said that, I want to say that I'm not getting paid for saying this kind of thing by Putin or by Archie or by Sputnik or anybody else. This is my own view. If Putin agrees with it, well, that's his problem. He could be in McGovern's pocket.
Thank you. Thank you, Professor McGovern. Larry, recently, I understand, and I'll let you explain this, please, the Houthis killed a significant number of IDF and American contractors. What can you tell us about this?
Well, again, this is one of those reports out there. I've not seen the video, not seen it confirmed, but I did get it from a reliable source that an estimated 70 both Israeli and Blackwater squad were going to infiltrate outside activities on the ground, try to locate these mobile launch systems and destroy them. And the Russians reportedly had intelligence that they passed to the Houthis about the arrival of this 70-man team. And the Houthis reportedly ambushed them and killed them all.
And
So
the
we'll
70-man team consisted of IDF soldiers and American mercenaries. As you said,
Correct.
Blackwater, that's
Correct.
an American company, right?
Correct. It was Blackwater, originally set up by Americans. It's not. It's changed its name. I forget. Maybe it's XI, something like that. But if true, this shows you part of the frustration that the West has had in trying to control those damn Houthis. We sent our aircraft carrier, and they were supposed to quake in their shoes and up, and they didn't. And they've continued to shut down the Red Sea. Our aircraft carrier is limped away. May or may not be replaced by another one. So, the problem of locating these mobile launch systems has been very difficult. And that's why the Houthis are actually, making the United States look pretty foolish.
Ray, what advice would Mossad give to their commanders, and would CIA give back to Langley about the advisability of an IDF attack on Hezbollah?
Well, I think the IDF has its own intelligence components. Mossad, of course, would support them. But it's very clear that the IDF, the Israeli Defense Forces, are very chary about going against Hezbollah, okay, for very good reason. They lost last time, right? So I think they recognize Netanyahu's game as get involved with Hezbollah and then need U.S. help, and appeal to the Biden regime in the last 5+ months of its existence to come to its aid and get the U.S. involved militarily. That's the name of the game. Very clear to me. Whether the U.S. would be able to avoid getting involved militarily in an election year is another question. Judge, what bothers me most is what people are calling the Samson option. The Israelis are losing in Gaza. They're going to lose if they go against Hezbollah. Whether or not we help them, they're going to lose this fray. Iran and Turkey, they're going to come in, and Israel's going to lose. Now, what are the chances you would give Netanyahu not to resort to the use of nuclear weapons? I think he probably would. So that's what we're playing with here. That's why the U.S. input here is very, very important, as is the Russian input on Iran. Iran, please, say the Russians, please don't do anything to make the U.S. come in, to make the U.S. unable to avoid coming in, at least for the next 5.5 months. Please. So I think that's what's going on now. Maybe that accounts for some of the delay in the celebrated or eagerly anticipated Iranian response to the assassinations.
Yeah, let me add one thing in there to that. The level of cooperation between Iran and Russia on the military front has dramatically accelerated over the last 2 years. Iranian drone production did play a critical role for the Russians in their use of drones to counter the Ukrainian offensive, particularly last year. And part of that is attributable to the fact that the Iranians downed and recovered a CIA drone about I think it was 9 years ago, but it was one of the most sophisticated drones the CIA had. And Iran proceeded to clone it. So now what's going on is the Russians are this is my firm belief. The Russians are delivering at a minimum S-400, possibly S-500 anti-ballistic missile defense systems.
Let me just stop you. What do those numbers mean? S-400 and S-500. Where are they on the level of sophistication?
It's just S-500 is the most sophisticated. S-400 is like the latest, greatest. So, but S-500 is even more recent vintage. The Ukrainians had the S-300, which goes back to, I believe, the 1970s, 1980s. But the S-400 is basically has come out since George W. Bush walked away from the anti-ballistic missile treaty in 2002. So the Russians have the Russians have a system that can take out ballistic missiles. So they're not only deploying those, they're deploying Russian crews to service those weapon systems. And I believe that word has been passed both to Washington and Tel Aviv. If you strike these systems, and if our soldiers are attacked, that's going to be viewed as an attack on Russia. One of the other things is probably giving the Israelis pause about their preemptive strike that they keep talking about, but they're not doing. And I think Russia actually may be playing a more important role behind the scenes right now in trying to keep this from escalating to a hot war, because they understand if Iran strikes Israel, Israel will try to retaliate, and they'll retaliate with nukes. And once they retaliate with nukes, the entire oil production out of the Persian Gulf is done. The world is going to be looking down the face of a nuclear war. And I think Russia prefers to try to avoid that if they can.
Does does Iran, Larry, have nuclear weapons?
They might. I mean, they've got the systems to deliver it. They've got the facilities to produce it, but up to this point, we've not had any evidence that they have produced it. And they have the technical knowledge to build the warhead to go on the weapons. So, could they have developed it? We've in the past, the intelligence community's judged that no, because for religious reasons, they wanted to steer clear of that. But in light of the different attacks that they've undertaken, because let's not kid ourselves. The United States has had long-standing support going back 40 years to a variety of groups that have carried out what we would label as terrorist attacks inside Iran, both from the Baluchis in southeast Iran, the Kurds, and then this group, the Mujahideen al-Haq, MEK. So, Iran may have just reached a point of saying, okay, we got to defend ourselves.
Judge, it's very important to emphasize that there's no evidence that they've reached that point. There is some speculation and a couple of statements by senior Iranian officials. Oh, maybe you ought to reassess where we are on building a nuclear weapon, as distinct from highly enriched uranium. Okay, so the danger here is to say, well, it makes really good sense for the Iranians to reassess this and maybe go ahead and do a nuclear weapon. But we have, with the intelligence community, have more to rely on than fatwas or spiritual statements against this. We will know almost as soon as they try to do a nuclear weapon to put on, to fill with highly enriched uranium. So let's not give any fodder to the John Boltons and others of this world who say, well, now they're going to get a nuclear weapon. So far, so good. As of March, the intelligence community was sticking to its unanimous decision expressed with high confidence back in November of 2007 that they were not working on a nuclear weapon and that there was no indication that they planned to.
Let me ask each of you, starting with Larry, what is your best prediction, understanding of what will happen with Israel, Iran, Hezbollah? Is Netanyahu crazy enough to attack Hezbollah directly?
Yes. Well, and let's understand, they're already attacking. Israel is already attacking Hezbollah targets in southern Lebanon and up into Beirut. And Hezbollah is attacking Israel's, firing off rockets, missiles, and even anti-tank guided missiles at Israeli positions. They forced out 100,000 Israelis from kibbutzim in the north. And the Houthis are firing. So it's not like we're going from a position of everything's tranquil, nobody's doing anything. What we're talking about is, are we going to see the kind of escalation that Netanyahu will order the IDF into southern Lebanon? Maybe, but what we've had as well is pushback from the Israeli military leadership, and that they may reach a conclusion that what Netanyahu's asking them to do is a suicide mission, and will then refuse orders. And then, because we've already had groups of Israelis attacking other Israelis, particularly over the rape of Palestinian prisoners, where you had some of the army's security force go in to arrest those guards that were guilty of sodomizing Palestinian male prisoners. And then on top of that, you see the attacks that have taken place by the settlers going in trying to free these people. So let's get ourselves that they're all, in the same boat in the same direction.
Ray, what's your feeling about the next phase of Netanyahu's bellicosity?
Judge, it all depends on his reading, that is Netanyahu's reading of the support he can expect from the United States. Now, absent a declaration, a formal one, that the U.S. will not support Israel if it gets into war with Hezbollah, absent that, Netanyahu has such a deep stake in what's going on that he's going to try to do that. Now, would the Israeli military refuse orders? I don't know. They certainly have opposed this idea, but my guess is that they would go ahead and would be involved in a major conflict. And maybe Netanyahu is right. Maybe he's as sly as a fox and says, well, here the U.S. will have to come in because Blinken and Sullivan are running this thing. They're both Zionists and they don't want to lose the election. They don't want to lose the support of AIPAC and the major donors. So, it's very volatile. If Netanyahu has his way, I think there will be a greater conflagration. Whether Iran reacts in a measured way, as I think not only the U.S., but the Russians have been advising Iran to do, if they pick their targets really carefully and lessen the chances that this will blow up into a big, wider regional war, that would be another case that would argue for tamping down a widening of the war. But you can't depend on that either, because they are going to react, and they're going to react strongly, and then Netanyahu will be in a position of seeing if he's going to be able to persuade the U.S. to come in. He said that the Americans have supported us 80%. He said that 25 years ago, 80%. And then he added, that's absurd. Well, it may not be 80% anymore, but it's 80% of the donor class. And that's what counts. And that's what Netanyahu knows counts here before the election. That's my reading.
Gentlemen, thank you very much. Thank you yet again for your double duty this week. I look forward to your usual day or time, but much appreciated. I want to spend a fair amount of time with you on the more recent events in and around Israel. But before we do, there is some relatively breaking news on the Ukraine front. What is your take on this invasion of Kursk by a supposedly crack or top team of Ukrainian soldiers?
I think the Ukrainians received some good intelligence from us. Remember, we have space-based surveillance. We can see most everything most of the time, especially in Russia and Ukraine. I'm sure that we have our eyes on the front line trace and also the Russian border. And they identified an area that was very, very weakly defended with only 30, 40, 50 policemen, and said, this is an opportunity for you to storm across the border into an area where there's really nothing to stop you and demonstrate that you can penetrate into Russia itself. And this will create the illusion that there is still life left in the Ukrainian military and that everybody should contribute money to you. I think that's what happened.
Interesting word, illusion. I mean, is there any military target that was attacked or a military purpose served, or is it just a PR stunt?
Well, you call it a PR stunt, but some people were killed and
Yes.
some were wounded. I don't know precisely how many, so it was more than a PR stunt. But obviously, when 1,000 men come out of a forest and storm your position and you have 50 policemen to stop them, it's a rather short encounter. So I think the real purpose was, yes, to demonstrate what we said. We're still in the fight and we can do these things. The Russians have reacted not in a panic by any means. They reacted very deliberately, sending forces into the area. And I think this will result in a stiffening of border surveillance and security by the Russians.
In reality, how weak does the Ukrainian military remain farther west, where the Russians continue to decimate it?
Well, we don't have exact numbers and they're difficult to come by right now, but I would be surprised if you have more than 100 or 150,000 troops left that can actually mount any kind of serious defense. There are certainly more than just 150,000 milling around. But remember, the country is being stripped out of whatever they can find for manpower. People are being shoved into uniform, handed a weapon, given a little bit of training, maybe a few days, and sent forward. So it's literally an exercise in recruiting, forcibly recruiting cannon fodder. So Ukraine is really finished. Now, people keep asking, well, then why don't the Russians move forward? And again, I've tried to explain this, that the Russians don't want a settlement which involves their governing Ukrainians.
Right.
They control what's Russian right now. They still are interested in Kharkov and Odessa, Russian-speaking cities historically. But they really don't want to advance much further west because you're just taking over areas that are filled with hundreds of thousands of Ukrainians. And the Russians aren't stupid. They know the Russians are not welcome. They don't want to get into a fight there. They don't want to end up, killing civilians to suppress them, which is what the Soviets did. So they'd rather end this on what they think are the terms that make sense, which is for them to retain control of what I just described. And we're not willing to do that. Zelensky says he won't do it, but I think he's going to be forced to before long.
Is there any military significance to the arrival and ostentatious display of F-16s in Ukraine?
No, there's so few F-16s involved. These are old airframes. I think they originated in Denmark. They have been updated with more contemporaneous electronics. They can certainly carry weapons. The thing that gives the Russians pause, and one of the reasons that initially President Biden said he would not provide modernized aircraft, was very simply because they can carry nuclear weapons. And as I recall, President Biden said if we were to do that, then we're marching in the direction of World War III, and that's something I don't want to do. Well, he's crossed that red line. Hopefully they don't have access to anything nuclear. As far as I know, they don't. But that's the only thing that the Russians would be concerned about. The F-16s, they'll be acquired, they'll be targeted and shot down if they're used.
Here's President Zelensky. I'm not sure what he's saying here, but he is showing off the F-16s, cut number 12.
I can't for today give you details with the missions. I think you will see, maybe not all of them, but you will see the results. We will decide to comment if it was the result with F-16 or not. It's not. I mean, it's not the
Revolutionary salute to Big AJ for the donation to the war chest. Revolution is a way of life. Appreciate the love, family. Salute.
The moment for this. I think it's very dangerous for today. We need to do all the security measures which have been discussed with our partners about using F-16.
They really have no military, but aren't they about 40 years old?
Yes, the airframes originated at least 3 to 4 decades ago.
Okay.
Judge, it's a giant Potemkin village. That's what Ukraine has become. It's a facade. There's not much behind it anymore except suffering people in Ukraine. And then you get these utterly false polls coming out talking about how everybody supports Zelensky. That's just not true. The population there is sick of this, desperately wants an end to the fighting. So this is over except for the facade that we prop up with lots and lots and lots of cash. How else could Mrs. Zelensky drive around in a Bugatti?
Wow. I would imagine that none of this will change, at least for the next 90 days. So that is until after November 5th, with the American presidential election. Do you think the State Department recognizes the decrepit state of Ukraine military and its impending demise?
Sure. Behind the scenes, I think people have finally come to terms with reality. They're no longer drinking their own Kool-Aid the way they did months ago. And, you know, Zelensky and his wife just purchased a magnificent winery in Tuscany. So now that they own that and they own the villa that goes with it, they have a place to go to relatively quickly. So I would think he knows that things are ending. And when it gets close to total disaster, he'll pack it in and leave, much as we saw people leave Afghanistan, as we saw generals and other people, Iraqi generals, leaving with suitcases of cash from Iraq into Jordan and Kuwait. It's the same thing.
Switching gears, Colonel, does the United States government ever second guess or say no to Israel?
Second guess, yes. No, unlikely. But I don't think we have ever confronted the kind of leadership in Israel that we see today. I mean, I'm sure you can go back and find presidents and prime ministers and others who were put off by the arrogance of some Israeli prime ministers from time to time and over the last 50 years. But this is different. You know, this is hubris on a scale that is hard to imagine. And when you are a victim of your own hubris, which is the case with Netanyahu, it distorts reality. It sabotages your ability to carefully analyze. You sort of lose touch with reality. And I think there's an understanding that that's happened, but there's nothing that anybody in Washington can do to stop it. They all live in fear of the Israeli lobby.
So in the past 2 weeks, the following words and images have come about in Israel. 2 assassinations, horrific torture, civilians breaking into a military prison to extricate the torturers, decisions by the Justice Department not to prosecute the torturers, IDF grunts begging their superiors to beg civilian leadership not to send them into Hezbollah because they're exhausted. The recognition in the West that the IDF has not and cannot defeat Hamas in Gaza. What does all this tell you? Is this a recipe for starting another war?
Well, I think it's a recipe for the disintegration of the Israeli state. That's my own view. And I think the religious leadership in Israel, there are large numbers of prominent rabbis who have reinforced Netanyahu's message, which you've also heard from people like Ben Gvir. And that is that they're dealing with the Amalek, animals that deserve the worst, and that anything you do to the animals that are in front of you is justified. So the notion of any sort of moral restraint is completely absent. And that's a strong view, widely shared inside the Israeli population. I'm sure you saw the polling that was on an Israeli television channel, where more than 47% of the population felt that rape and torture and murder and so forth of Palestinian prisoners was justified. So I think there's deep-seated irrational hatred. It's been unleashed, and it permeates the atmosphere in Israel. It's very sad, but it's true. And that's not going to go away quickly. The only way to deal with that is to confront it directly. But we're not going to do that. Our government will not confront it. They may say something in private, but from the standpoint of the current leadership in Israel, they know they exert infinitely more influence and control over the Senate and the House in the United States than President Biden, or for that matter, President Harris does.
The Israeli finance minister, Smotrich, one of the right-wing members of Prime Minister Netanyahu's cabinet and coalition, stated publicly that the best thing to do would be simply to starve the 2 million residents of Gaza, but he's not sure the world would let them get away with that. Hard to imagine a public official saying something like that in public and suggesting it's somehow consistent with international law. I guess that means Israel has its own laws unique to itself and its own standards unique to itself.
Oh, absolutely. And I think you need to take that into account. Their view of what is right and wrong is by no means the same as ours. The last time we saw something like this, it was Yagoda in the Ukraine, where they systematically starved millions of Ukrainians to death. Those they could not shoot or deport were simply allowed to starve and die. And of course, they committed the same kinds of horrendous acts against the population because the Soviets recruited criminals from the prisons under the control of the NKVD, led by Yagoda in Ukraine, to execute the atrocities. That wasn't the only place. They had already starved 2 or 3 million people at a time in various parts of Russia, Central Asia, Kazakhstan, Uzbekistan, so forth. So these things have happened before. They didn't get much attention in the West because we didn't have much access to the information. And there were people in the West that were pro-communist and didn't want that information to get out. Right now, I'm rather surprised that we're hearing these things coming out of Israel, because that suggests that the press, which is almost universally behind Israel, even if they don't like what they do, is allowing these leaks to occur somehow.
Tell me, Colonel, about Russian technical support for Iran, anticipating a conflagration between Iran and Israel.
Well, as you pointed out earlier, I think you probably even showed part of the Lavrov's, the foreign minister's comments that he made in Tehran and back in Moscow regarding the readiness of Russia to cooperate with Iran. And they signed a treaty with Iran. You could call it a treaty. It's an agreement for military cooperation assistance as well as economic development, because they want to develop this alternative route to the through the Red Sea and the Suez Canal that then runs the length of Iran up through Azerbaijan and then into Russia all the way to St. Petersburg. So I think that was the beginning of even more serious military cooperation. What you're seeing now is really the result of those agreements. We've seen Iskander missiles, ballistic missiles that have been used in Ukraine, as well as I would assume some Kashan cruise missiles, but I haven't seen it. They probably have something like it. But more important, electronic warfare capabilities that the Russians have rarely allowed anybody outside of Russia to utilize and employ, and they're very substantial. We've had to deal with them from time to time in Syria. We know that they're very capable and can have an enormous impact on combat in the air as well as on the ground. And now finally, we're seeing the S-400 system show up. The S-400 is a very good air and missile defense system. It's advertised by the Russians, obviously, as the best in the world, but then again, we advertise the world. We tend to dismiss a lot of what the Russians say about their equipment. And that's a mistake because, as we've seen in Ukraine, Russian equipment has performed above expectation. Much of our equipment has performed below expectation. So I think it would be a mistake to dismiss this S-400 system. They can acquire a target at least 250 miles and maybe more. We don't know. Now, they can't shoot it down at that range, but they can acquire it and track it. They normally, you want the enemy's aircraft to come in closer before you shoot it down. Now, that works to our advantage to some extent because we can launch JASSM and other kinds of cruise missiles with different kinds of warheads from a distance, from B-2s and B-52s, even from our fighter aircraft. So that, if we see an air battle that involves those things, it's going to be the first time in history that our air forces have flown against this kind of dense, modern air and missile defense capabilities, certainly since Vietnam. And we'll find out what it can do. But right now, they have 6 different missiles, excellent range capabilities. It's gonna make for a difficult time. And of course, as we were discussing before the show, Judge, I'm sure that Russian military assistance involves technicians on the ground in uniform helping to operate these systems. It couldn't be otherwise. I've been looking for, but have not seen yet, evidence for any Chinese assistance, because the Chinese have provided in the past some very good electronic warfare capabilities to the Iranians as well. And the Chinese have an interest in this war, as we've talked before. And we just don't get it here in the United States. We don't understand that this is not a one-off between Israel and Iran, or Israel, Iran, and Hezbollah and the Yemeni Houthis. This is a far bigger proposition.
Here's a map that you and I talked about a while ago. This must show, I believe, the red line, the new path for commerce that the Iranians and the Russians are preparing, does it not?
Well, I can't see it completely. If it starts down in the Indian Ocean,
yes,
and runs up through Iran, then the answer is yes.
Yes.
That's a very, very important alternative. And the Saudis are now very interested in contributing to it because they're prepared to bypass the Suez Canal and the long route to Europe, or for that matter, to the United States in favor of this particular approach.
Well, this gets products and goods starting in India all the way up to Europe with a lot shorter route than the one that is currently used involving the Suez Canal.
And that's an important point. You brought up India. India is part of this in a big way. And we have viewed India in the past periodically as a strategic partner, but India has always had a very close relationship with Russia. And India, whatever its feelings about Islam and Muslims, is very uncomfortable with what's happening in the Middle East for the same reason the Chinese are. This could disrupt trade and commerce and have a negative impact on the global economy.
You would not be surprised. In fact, I think you indicated to me before we started the show, it would be almost inconceivable if this were not the case, that this high-end new Russian equipment now delivered to Iran could only be operated by Russian technicians.
Well, I wouldn't say only. I'm sure they have Iranians that are trained to some extent, but I don't think they would leave it to chance. They understand the stakes are very high. And no air and missile defense system of any kind is perfect. So they know that missiles and aircraft will ultimately penetrate it. But if you can make the cost of penetration very high, shooting down most of what is coming in your direction, as well as the aircraft, then you can have an impact on the campaign. And I think the Russians know to do that, they've got to be on the ground in Iran.
Colonel, I'd like to play for you a brief clip from the Turkish foreign minister from 4 days ago and ask you what you think of it. Chris, cut number 4.
It is no longer acceptable for America to try to sweep aside and mitigate every evil Israel does. Let them heed our warnings. I say this as the children of the region, as the people of the region. The emotional atmosphere the region is going through the psychological state of the people, the images of massacres they see on the screen every day, the fact that no help is being extended to the helpless Palestinians. And in the face of this, Muslim countries are constantly being lectured on other unnecessary issues, has long since exceeded the limits of tolerance in terms of democracy and human rights.
The standing of this gentleman, the foreign minister, and what is the significance, in your view, of what he just said?
First, this foreign minister is rumored to be Erdogan's likely successor. He is far more aggressive in his views on the use of Turkish military power than Mr. Erdogan is. Mr. Erdogan has tried to stay out of this war. However much he has signaled his distaste or contempt for Israel and what it's doing, he's tried to keep the Turks out of the war. He's very sensitive to the economy for good reasons. Turkish economy is fragile. They've had a lot of problems with their currency. They're very dependent on the largesse from Qatar and other Muslim states. However, Mr. Erdogan has had some difficult sessions with his National Defense Council. And he knows that if the Israelis move into Lebanon, that will destabilize Lebanon. Now, it's also important that your viewers know something else about us and Israel. We have been preparing forces in Syria to attack Turkey. Now, what am I talking about? I'm talking about Kurds primarily, the MEK and other organizations, PPK. They have been encouraged to arm up and conduct direct assaults over the Turkish border into Turkey. The Turks know this, and they're very upset about it. And we've done this periodically in the past. This time it's gotten very serious. So as a result, you've seen Arab tribesmen, very well armed, assault our bases in Syria. I don't know what the current status is. I'm not hearing very much through the mainstream media about it, but I suspect that they've had some success. I'd be surprised if we have not had casualties. My understanding is that they're currently in control of the oil facilities. At the same time, the Russians have built a base, a new base in northern Syria, and they're not interested in seeing us remain in that country in a position from which we could direct action against them. So you have a larger war already developing, and the Israelis are part of it, we're part of it, and the Turks are on the brink of admitting to this and going public with it. But if they go public with it in a rather major way, the demand of the Turkish population will be to attack. And that's something Erdogan still does not want.
Here's the follow-up from the Turkish foreign minister, which is even more bellicose than the clip we ran, cut number 5.
The country has lost all its moral superiority in this geography because of the Israeli issue. Therefore, in this new light, in this period when the international system has lost all its norms and rules, diplomatic cooperation and constructive cooperation between Egypt, Turkey, and other countries have become even more important in establishing regional peace. Because the collapse of the international system is now an equation, we, as the powers of the region, as a country, are trying to truly embrace the issue and do everything we can together. In the name of peace, in the name of stability.
And said that the Turkish military is competent and commendable.
Well, I think those are accurate terms. The Turks are very proud of their country. They're a martial people. I think the average Turkish soldier is a very tough and formidable opponent. Now, I don't know how much experience they have with large unit operations, but it would be a mistake to underestimate the Turks in any case. Now, are they likely to come in quickly? I think that's not the case because we have not yet seen the war explode onto the scene against Hezbollah. If Hezbollah becomes decisively engaged by the Israelis, then I think we're going to see some movement from the Turks. The Turks are also sensitive to the fact that the region that he's in Syria, Jordan, the Arabian Peninsula, all the way to Egypt, this is historically Turkey's sphere of influence. It's not historically Iran's sphere of influence. Yet the Iranians have taken the lead for the Islamic countries to oppose Israel. And this is uncomfortable. The Turks really feel that they are the once and future kings of Islam. After all, the last first caliph of Islam, or genuine caliph of Islam, was the Turkish Sultan. Since then, there's been none. That is in the backs of people's minds. Now, how far will the Turks go? Well, if you're a Syrian, you have mixed feelings, because Syria was a province of the Ottoman Empire. And the Turks tend to view most of the territory, certainly from Kirkuk in Iraq north, and all of Syria, Jordan, and these areas, and Israel itself, as part of their sphere of influence. So they have mixed feelings, but things are desperate. The Arab states are desperate. They fear all sorts of things. Arabs are expressing the view that the Israelis want to conquer the Suez Canal and control it. Whether or not that's true is hard to tell. I think it's unlikely, but the Israelis did seize a portion of it in 1956 when the British and the French intervened in Egypt. The point is, there is more than just a little concern, and the elites, as we've talked about before, General Sisi, King Abdullah in Jordan in particular, on very shaky ground. Those men know that their lives hang in the balance, and they could be gone at any point in time because their populations are enraged. The Turks are enraged. The one place where people are not as enraged, interestingly enough, is Iran. And the Iranian leadership, despite whatever you may hear publicly, desperately wants to avoid a war with Israel, primarily because they don't want to go to war with us.
Last subject matter, Colonel. Was there recently some military activity by the Houthis, which resulted in about 70 deaths of IDF and some American contractors, about which you can tell us?
Well, I can tell you only what I found through open source material. I haven't seen anything classified, but I am reliably told that roughly 70 Israeli so-called commandos or special forces, special operations force types, along with some number of Americans, the total number was 70. How many were Israeli and how many were American mercenaries that were joined in this operation? I don't know what
I'm going to tell you why Russia gave the Houthi rebels the intelligence that they needed to trap these Israelis and Americans and kill them, because NATO gave the terrorists in Africa the information, the intelligence they needed to kill the Russians and the Africans. They just paid them back in Yemen.
What the exact breakdown was, but it was obviously mostly Israeli. And they infiltrated successfully into Yemen, but they were tracked from the moment they infiltrated by overhead satellites, presumably Russian. And the Russians provided this information to the Iranians, who immediately telegraphed it to the Houthis. And whatever you say about the Houthis is that they're tough hombres on the battlefield. They set up an ambush and they killed all of them. And there is footage of the dead. And I haven't had a chance to examine it carefully, but clearly most of it's Israeli, but there are indisputably some American mercenaries there. There may be some Brits mixed into it who are also employees of the same contract firm. Now, this is something very important for everybody listening to understand. Persistent surveillance today changes everything in warfare. It not only enables precision strike on a scale that has never been the case in the past, it makes it impossible for forces to infiltrate into regions without being discovered. It makes so-called surprise attacks on the scale of Pearl Harbor an impossibility. We don't really want to come to terms with that in the United States. We continue to look at forces from the vantage point of the Second World War and the distant past. Those days are over. You can't cross the Atlantic with impunity. You can't do very much of anything without being detected. So the point is that this is a wake-up call, not just for the Israelis or the contractors who are part of this, but this should be a wake-up call for all of us. And we need to take it very, very seriously, because the only way to wage war in this setting is to disrupt the space-based reconnaissance, intelligence, and surveillance. When you do that, the game changes, and you're really in full-blown war. Then you have to have the ability to rapidly recover from the loss of your satellites through other redundant means. The Israelis understand that, and they're probably prepared for it. We are not. And that's really what we should take from this. And we should not continue to underestimate these militias. They're very deadly organizations.
It's been a wonderfully informative conversation, Colonel. I have to say, I don't expect to be reading on the front page of the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal that Americans were killed by the Houthis. It's just not something that the West wants to talk about. But thank you very much.
Cool feat. Follow me.